Chapter 345. The surface of Woody's skin had turned into a mirror-like metallic form, and a 1 millimeter radius around him was covered by a layer of repulsive force field that was hard to see with the naked eye. This was the defensive form of his 6 transformations. A giant green fireball charged at Woody, but unlike his previous strategy of dodging, Woody didn't try to dodge, and instead directly embraced the giant fireball. The green flame, fueled by spirit and consciousness, was repelled by the repulsive field on Woody's body, and couldn't burn him at all. Fabrizio's giant body was blocked by Woody just like that, and he kept howling in pain. Woody felt his body slowly moving back. Fabrizio's strength was so great that he felt like he could easily escape from his embrace. "What are you waiting for? Don't worry about me." Golden Light and Xia Laikong heard him and attacked at the same time. Psychic bullets as dense as a meteor shower, as well as an omnidirectional attack filled with lightning and tornadoes. The blazing energy was like an inverted bowl, completely enveloping Fabrizio and Woody's position. When the smoke dissipated, only Woody, who was still in his metallic form, was left in his original position. Fabrizio had completely disappeared. It had been more than 3 hours since the start of the battle. After expending a lot of energy and stamina, Woody, Xia Laikong, and the others had finally eliminated Fabrizio. However, during the battle, Fabrizio used Carmen's body as a parasite, killing Carmen and heavily injuring Brian. If it weren't for Xia Laikong and Golden Light's support, the operation would have failed. In this situation, where Fabrizio was first weakened by Higram, and then struck down by the Spirit Energy clone, under the joint attack of Woody and Xia Laikong, 2 level 5 ability users, he was still able to fight to this extent. This was enough to prove that as a level 5 ability user, Fabrizio's demon race, regardless of whether it was vitality or combat strength, far exceeded humans of the same level. Bursts of green smoke rose from Woody's metallized body, and the high temperature caused the surrounding air to distort. Woody looked at Jin Guang and Xia Laikong, who were also exhausted. He also looked at Tony, Yin Bei, and Brian, who had fainted on the ground. "The 2 of you must be from Xia. There have been a lot of rumors about you guys recently." Woody pointed at the sky and said, "Can you explain what is going on in the sky?" "If I'm not mistaken, the one who appeared just now was the clone of your Xia Emperor, right?" Although 3 hours had passed, the battle between Higram and the psychic energy clone had never stopped. It was just that the battlefield had become the space outside the Earth. From time to time, star-like lights would appear in the sky. More than half of the Western continent could see them. He was even more shocked by the strength of the monster from before. At the same time, Woody felt an indescribable bitterness in his mouth. This was because he had already seen Li Onping's psychic energy incarnation before his opponent shifted the battlefield to the air. That was how he had confirmed Li Onping's existence. Li Onping is invincible. It was only now that Woody realized the huge gap between him and his opponent. It was something that could not be sensed just by looking at the intelligence reports. When Xia Laikong heard Woody's question, he calmly said, "His Majesty is concerned about the safety of the entire human race." After noticing the strange movements of the humanoid monster, he secretly snuck into the Western continent. As for now, he is naturally fighting to destroy that monster. At this point, Xia Laikong suddenly looked at an empty spot and said, "I wonder if this friend here understands?" Countless particles seemed to have gathered together in the spot that was originally empty, forming into Judy Eleanor's appearance. She had been hiding here all this time without making a move. The moment she appeared, she said to Woody, whose expression had changed, "When I arrived, Carmen had already been possessed. I was only hiding to help you guys hold the line." Woody glared at Judy Eleanor fiercely. Obviously, he knew that it was not as simple as he said. It was only because of the existence of the 2 members of the Xia Dragonfinch, Xia Laikong and Jin Guang. Judy might have been planning to exhaust the Xia Dragonfinch's strength. She might even be planning to be the Oriole behind the mantis stalking the cicada. When Woody thought that Carmen might have been sacrificed because of this dark scheming, he felt even more uncomfortable. However, the Xia Dragonfinch was still an outsider, so he was not in a hurry to argue with Judy. He had already decided that once the battle was over, he would find Judy and give Carmen and Brian enough compensation. But will there be a future? Woody looked up at the stars in the sky, and he couldn't help but feel worried. Judy frowned and asked, "Woody, are you sure that the one fighting the monster up there is Lianping?" Woody nodded. There's no mistake. It's the Qi clone he used in the Battle of Tianjing. The various governments had long gathered the details of the Battle of Tianjing, and the information regarding Li Anping's Qi clone was of the utmost importance. Although she had received confirmation from both Woody and Xia Likong, Judy still had a look of disbelief in her eyes as she looked at the starlight that kept bursting out in the sky. The power that had been revealed in the battle between the Qi clone and Higram had completely exceeded their estimation of Li Anping's strength back in the Battle of Tianjing. Invincible under the heavens. These 4 words were so heavy that even Judy Eleanor felt an endless pressure in her heart. Regardless of whether Li Anping wins or loses, the Federation is finished. The virtual mathematics service also needs to make early plans. Thinking of this, Judy Eleanor once again lifted her head and looked towards Xia Likong and the others. However, Xia Likong and Jing Guang did not pay much attention to this. Fabrizio, who had fought an intense battle with them for over 3 hours, had already made them understand how powerful these monsters were. What made them even more worried was that, as members of the Xia Dragonfinch, this was the first time they had seen someone who could fight against Li Anping for so long. In outer space, 2 figures, one black and one red, were like 2 shooting stars, constantly colliding and tearing at each other. Hygrim's eyes had turned completely red, and even his pupils could no longer be seen. His enraged intent had also risen to a length of over 2,000 meters from his body. Wherever it passed, the particles and even the Qi clones would be mercilessly suppressed and rejected by him. Hygrim fought against the Qi clones in close combat, turning the surrounding space into a state of vacuum. The various elements and energies in outer space, which were already scarce, were all completely rejected by the Qi clones. This caused the Qi clones to be unable to use their spiritual force fields to perform various powerful moves. This caused the Qi clones to only be able to rely on their own strength. Although as the battle progressed, Hygrim's body had been filled with the will of fury. This fury was constantly being converted into power and enraged intent, allowing him to still have a certain level of ability to think. Black clearly hasn't even reached the 6th energy level, yet he was able to use that kind of move earlier. But it's good now. The enraged intent has completely cut off the energy around him. Right now, he can only unleash the power of a 5th energy level at most. Just then, the Qi clones clashed with Hygrim's fists several thousand times. Hygrim was still completely unscathed, while every time the Qi clones were hit by Hygrim's fists, traces of black Qi would dissipate from the Qi clones. It seemed as if the Qi clones in his body were getting weaker and weaker. However, this process was very slow, and with the Qi clones constantly replenishing their own Qi, it was even slower. Even if I only use the enraged intent and my fists and legs, he'll still be dead after 10 hours. A cruel smile appeared on Hygrim's face. The red enraged intent had already gathered on his shoulders, and with a dash, he charged into the Qi clone's embrace. Abnormal martial style, star destruction, the space within a radius of several kilometers seemed to have collapsed from this collision. Hygrim was like an aircraft carrier that was crushing a small sampan in front of it. Boom! Without a sound, the Qi clones were sent flying several hundred kilometers away by this collision, flying into the depths of the universe. Black Qi continued to surge all over his body. Clearly, the power of this attack was too strong, and it had severely damaged the Qi clone structure. This is the Black Devil? You're so weak that it's laughable. Let me use your power. His will turned into electromagnetic waves at the speed of light, catching up to the Qi clones that had been sent flying. The next moment, the red enraged intent trembled violently and split into 2 wing-like objects that were over 1,000 meters long, spreading out on Hygrim's left and right. Abnormal martial style, God's wrath heavenly fall the wings formed by the enraged intent shattered, and countless streams of chi that were hard to see with the naked eye turned into a state that was similar to quantum states. They simulated the transition process of electrons, releasing a tremendous amount of energy. The energy turned into an unstoppable torrent that gushed toward the chi clones. Wherever it passed by, everything before it turned to chaos. The violent turbulence was like an interstellar cannon, instantly chasing after the chi clones with astonishing destructive powers that could instantly wipe out the entire food chain on the surface. God's wrath heavenly fall. This was the most violent and insane attack that Hygram, who was at the 7th energy level, could unleash. Using the enraged intent to push it to its peak, the torrent of energy that was like a supernova explosion was about to drown the chi clones in an instant. Before this terrifyingly strong power that could make one feel despair, it was as if every single atom in the world was wailing and trembling. Seeing that the chi clones had been completely drowned by his own powers, Hygram's eyes were filled with excitement. This is me, Hygram. I shall become the greatest warrior of the demon race. Rule over the endless multivariate universe. Become the king of kings, the god of gods. Just as Hygram was enjoying the endless joy brought by his victory, a huge palm suddenly descended from the sky, grabbing onto his head. Hygram, welcome to Earth. At the next moment, a destructive power that completely surpassed that of the chi clones exploded from the other party's palm, and it took effect on Hygram's head without holding back. Chapter 346. When Li Anping had been studying the magnetic field in his body, he had already understood one thing. Due to the nature of his psychic incarnation, he could not use electromagnetic forces to propel his psychic incarnation like his main body. Therefore, when Li Anping was able to change the magnetic field in his body and push his strength to an unprecedented height, he understood that in terms of pure speed and strength, he had already completely surpassed his psychic incarnation. And this surge of physical strength, released through the virtual force field, caused Li Anping's strength to undergo a complete qualitative change. Black, this is your main body? But why is your main body even stronger than your psychic incarnation? And so much stronger? Hygram felt that the hand grabbing onto his head was like a giant pillar that held up the sky. No matter how hard he struggled, he could not break free. Moreover, the destructive power that was continuously swallowing and spitting out from his opponent's body made him feel even more shocked. Why? Having his head grabbed by his opponent like this, Hygram could only feel boundless fury erupting from the bottom of his heart. His enraged intent and pure brute force also continued to grow and soar under the support of this fury. Get out of my way! As this surge of furious will spread out in all directions, Hygram's physical strength soared wildly. The muscles in his 4 limbs twisted and trembled violently, as if wanting to completely shake off the virtual force field that Li Anping had applied. However, it was useless. His enraged intent and physical strength, which had worked so well previously, were now unable to break through Li Anping's blockade. Hygram felt like an insect that had been frozen in amber, unable to move at all from head to toe. This feeling of helplessness made the flames of fury in his heart burn even more fiercely. However, Li Anping did not care how angry Hygram was. As if he was holding up a little chick, he twisted Hygram's body toward himself and saw his opponent's twisted, irritable, and furious face. This Hygram's strength has almost reached 50 points, and it's still increasing. No wonder even his psychic incarnation was completely suppressed by him. Behind Li Anping was the black psychic incarnation. Before Hygram's heavenly fury hit him, the psychic incarnation had already returned to Li Anping's side. But after using electromagnetic forces to boost my physical strength, my current strength and speed have already broken through 60 points. If I'm given more time, these numbers should be even higher. Currently, Li Anping's physical fitness was 60. 2. His speed 60. 6. And his physical fitness 60. 1. If Li Anping was given enough time to familiarize himself with this power and collect more energy, his physical fitness would be even higher. But for now, it was more than enough to deal with Hygrim. Bang! Lianping grabbed Hygrim's head with one hand, and his right fist seemed to have turned into a stream of light, a wave, and a layer of dense fog. Bringing along a power that could shake the continental shelf, the fist surged violently toward Hygrim's face. With just one punch, Hygrim, who hadn't been hurt by nuclear fusion, high-energy laser, high temperature, or any other means, had a constipated expression on his face. Because of the pain, it was excruciatingly painful. In his entire life, Hygrim had never experienced the word pain so intensely. His face, which had been unscathed all this while, now felt as if his nose had become crooked. Lianping also felt pain, but he also felt exhilaration. At this moment, whether it was the surrounding energy or matter, they were all expelled by his fury intent. Within a radius of 100 meters, there was only him and Hygrim. 80% of my strength is no longer a problem. Then let me see where I can go with my full strength. He could finally unleash the power of his physical body without any worries. He waved his fist to his heart's content. Boom! Another punch. If there was a medium in the universe, then this punch would probably directly turn all matter in the surroundings into powder. But now, Hygrim could only bear all of this alone. If all of the principles behind this punch were removed and slowed down thousands of times, then this was just a simple, unadorned, and extremely simple punch. However, it was precisely this simple punch that, after being pushed by Lianping with the most extreme and violent power, had achieved the effect of destroying all things and dominating everything. Hygrim felt as if his face had been hit by a huge planet and then mercilessly crushed. Under this terrifying power, the rays of the sun shining on the two seemed to have started to bend slightly. Did this mean that the power of Lianping's punch had already started to distort time and space? Hygrim didn't know. He was in no mood to think about this at all. After being punched twice in the head by Lianping, he felt as if he was a martial arts champion who had been mercilessly beaten up by a street gangster. The techniques he had learned since he was young were actually unable to be used in front of the naked violence of his opponent. Hygrim, who had been completely unscathed all this while, now had a small dent directly on his face. Meanwhile, at an angle that was hard to detect with the naked eye, the countless particles that formed his body turned into powder under this punch, drifting out from his face. He only felt boundless anger and boundless humiliation. There was no sound from his furious howl, but it turned into omnipresent electromagnetic waves, spreading out in all directions. Under this unprecedented fury, the enraged intent on Hygrim's body grew crazily, as if it had been doused with fuel. In an instant, it grew by several hundred meters. His power also increased greatly, growing crazily in the void force field. But it was useless, so noisy. As Lianping transmitted these words through electromagnetic waves, his right fist landed on Hygrim's head like rays of light. Even with Hygrim's supervision, he could only feel that he was drowned in a boundless sea of light. Each of Lianping's punches was like a bolt of lightning, mercilessly bombarding his face, causing him to be engulfed in endless pain and fury. In just a few short seconds, Lianping had already thrown out several thousand punches toward Hygrim. Even with the toughness of his body, he still felt some pain in his right hand. Hygrim's face looked even more deformed, and there was even a 2-inch-long crack on his forehead. This guy's really tough. Seeing that Lianping had stopped, Hygrim stared at Lianping with a face full of hatred. His eyes were like two red gems, showing how much fury was surging in his heart. "You're dead meat. I definitely won't kill you easily. I'll let you experience what true hell is, what true pain is." Lianping ignored him and only turned his head to look. "It's about time." Hygrim seemed to have realized something as well and also turned his head to look. In the direction of Earth, only a black dot could be seen. It seemed to be brewing something. While Lianping was subduing Hygrim, the Nianchi clone had gotten closer to Earth, came into contact with more atoms, and brewed a real attack. Countless hydrogen ions spun and accelerated by the Nyenchi clone, producing a large amount of positrons. Then, these positrons kept converging under the constraints of the magnetic field. An invisible beam of light shot out from the Nyenchi clone's palm. The annihilation reaction between the positrons and electrons released a huge amount of energy at this moment. However, the positrons, which had reached their maximum power in a vacuum and were invisible and colorless, did not hit Hygram immediately. Instead, they brushed past Hygram's body and shot into the boundless universe. However, before Hygram could rejoice, a strong and powerful arm had already grabbed the back of Hygram's head and pressed his entire face into the torrent of positron cannon. It was as if an ordinary person's head had been stuffed into a pool of sulfuric acid. Li Onping could feel an intense struggle coming from his hand. However, in the next moment, as the torrent of positron cannon became increasingly ferocious, Li Onping had already retreated rapidly, and Hygram's entire body had been completely submerged. He felt as if his body was continuously melting and countless tiny particles were continuously peeling off. It was like the final howl of a dying wild beast. However, a few seconds later, Hygram's enraged intent still pushed aside all the energy in the surroundings. Hygram, whose body had shrunk to 1/5 of its original size, was now like a shooting star, flying rapidly in the direction of Earth. At this moment, other than being filled with fury, there was also a hint of fear in his heart. This monster! I have to hurry back. Daddy will definitely be able to deal with him. Looking at Hygram's fleeing figure, the corners of Li Onping's lips curled up slightly, revealing a hint of a cold smile. On the boundless white land, a blue spatial door appeared on the ground. This door was like a crack that had appeared in space, as if it could lead to a faraway world. Gabe, who had been ordered by Hygram to guard this place, was looking furiously at the two strange-looking monsters before him. One of them was a lion with a human face, while the other was a creature that was floating in the air like a jellyfish. Gabe, what are you trying to do? Could it be that you're thinking of taking this world for yourself? Faced with their doubts, Gabe said with a displeased expression, "This new world has already been taken over by His Highness. Everything in here belongs to His Highness. You guys can scram." The two monsters exchanged a hesitant glance. When they heard the words His Highness, their imposing auras were completely gone. The guy with a human head and a lion's body said weakly, "But this is a discovery made by a spy." The jellyfish at the side also chimed in, "At least let us go in and take a look. This is the discovery of a new world. No matter what, we have to be allowed to inspect it. Otherwise, it'll be hard for us to explain things to His Highness." Gabe frowned and said casually, "It's just an ordinary resource planet. After some time, His Highness will bring over some soil and ores from there for you guys. You just have to follow the report." Hearing that, the two monsters exchanged a glance. However, the other party was a prince. Although he was the prince with the weakest influence, he was definitely not someone whom they, as low-level demons, could control. Just as the two monsters were at a loss of what to do, the spatial door suddenly started to tremble. Chapter 347. Is His Highness here? Gabe frowned and looked in the direction of the dimensional crossing gate. His Highness has returned so quickly? Hygram's slightly deformed head popped out from the spatial gate, and then he reached out his arm toward Gabe. "Save." He only managed to say one word when something seemed to pull him back to the other side of the dimensional crossing gate, leaving behind a sudden agonizing cry. That was His Highness? This scene was simply too horrifying for the three demons in front of them. This was especially so for Gabe, who knew Hygram's true abilities. He quickly walked up to the dimensional crossing gate, his face filled with disbelief. However, at the next moment, a thick arm reached out from the dimensional crossing gate, grabbing onto Gabe's head and dragging him over as well amidst his intense struggle. "Ah!" The remaining two monsters cried out and turned to flee. However, at the next moment, their bodies were swept by two dazzling light beams, and their bodies were instantly annihilated into countless particles. 2 hours later, in the death zone in the northern part of the Code Nation. As far as the eye could see, there were huge craters, shattered ground, destroyed mountains, and cut-off rivers. The entire death zone looked as if two giants had wrestled with each other. Other than ruins, there are all sorts of corpses that belong to humans and monsters. In the deepest part of the death zone, Li Onping was holding onto a gray arm. On the ground under his feet, there were all sorts of strange body parts. There were feet, knees, hands, shoulders, and so on. Li Onping was now grabbing onto an arm and biting down on it. As he chewed on the gray flesh in his mouth, he said, "It seems that he isn't as hard as you. But why doesn't he have a soul?" Li Onping could only sense that Gabe's flesh contained a lot of energy, all of which he could absorb and store. However, unlike how he had absorbed the souls and bodies of humans in the past, this energy was just ordinary energy and could not be used to strengthen his physical attributes. And there's such a unique body structure. In the psychic incarnation, Hygrim's entire body was sealed in the chest of the psychic incarnation. Only half of his head was exposed to the air, allowing him to speak. Hearing Li Onping's words, he said disdainfully, "We're all demons. What's the difference between eating our bodies and eating your own? As for the soul," he laughed, "our race never had a soul." Li Onping didn't say anything, but he analyzed in his heart. No soul? Were they completely relying on their biological brains to think? But on the other side of the door, I absorbed the souls of the two demons that were killed, although there was no increase in attributes. Does this mean that demons are also divided into many groups? At this time, Hygrim seemed to have finally reacted. His expression changed as he suddenly said, "No, why don't you even know this? Aren't you black? But why do you have the power of black?" At this point, he seemed to have thought of a possibility, but he looked at Li Onping in disbelief. Li Onping glanced at him and then ate the arm in his hand bite by bite. "You're right. I'm a human. How is that possible?" Hygrim was agitated. It looked like he was watching a pig eat a human. It could be seen how big of a blow Li Onping's identity as a human was to him. "How can you be a human? Don't get excited." Li Onping pointed a finger at his forehead and licked his lips. "Your level is higher than his, right? Not only is your body much stronger than this one, but you can also reduce your body size to maintain the integrity of your body's combat structure." "How interesting." Li Onping licked his lips again and said, "Although it's a bit troublesome to do, I still want to try it." "Damn human." Hearing Li Onping's words, Hygrim was furious. "You're dead. We've already discovered this world. My brother, my father, they'll all come to save me. They'll eat you, all your friends, family, and everyone you know. If you don't want to die, let go of me quickly." As he spoke, he began to struggle wildly. However, as his body shrank, his strength seemed to have weakened greatly, making it impossible for him to break free from the restraints of the psychic energy incarnation. Li Onping looked at Hygrim with a murderous look in his eyes. However, the other party didn't have a soul, and the spiritual force field couldn't read his memories from the cerebral cortex. As for the devils and the land of white, Li Onping had too many things that he wanted to know. He suddenly opened his mouth and bit down on Hygrim's head. Hygrim could still clearly see his teeth and saliva. Seeing Li Onping slowly biting down, Hygrim shouted, "Are you crazy? You're dragging the entire human race down with you. Stop it." However, Li Onping ignored him and slowly bit down. No matter how much Hygrim screamed, Li Onping didn't stop at all. It wasn't until Li Onping's teeth bit down on Hygrim's head that Hygrim finally revealed his cowardly side and began to beg for mercy. "Enough. What do you want? As long as I can do it, I'll agree. Don't eat me." Li Onping stretched his head back and wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth. The way he looked at Hygrim, the way he looked at food, made the latter's heart fill with coldness. "I want to know the situation of the entire White Land." As he spoke, Li Onping pointed at the stomach of the psychic energy incarnation. Gabe's head was twisted off and bound there, and he was looking at Li Onping angrily. "I'll also ask him, if there's any discrepancy in your answers, I'll take a bite out of each of you until you're completely eaten." Fear flashed through Hygrim's eyes, and he directly said, "The White Land is a continent with no end. It's the place we've lived since we were born. No end? How is that possible? Isn't it a planet? Higram laughed disdainfully. Human, your ignorance really makes me laugh. Seeing the coldness in Lianping's eyes, he immediately stopped laughing and continued. It's like the universe you're in has no end and is constantly expanding. The White Land doesn't have any space in the universe. Instead, it's an endless land. This land has been constantly expanding since it was born. Its size is limitless. Then what's with the teleportation gate? That's a world-crossing gate. In the land of White, there are some areas where space-time is relatively unstable. If you use a special method there, you can open a door to another world. However, most of them are dead zones without life. Only a few of them have life. Lianping touched his chin. He did not expect the White Land to be like this. He then asked, will the demons invade these worlds? Of course. Higram revealed a matter-of-fact expression. The resources in the White Land are very scarce. Only by invading these worlds can we obtain more resources and develop better. Then, this time, you've discovered Earth. Will you still send people over? Hearing this question, Higram immediately felt confident again and said loudly, of course. Do you think it's common to see a world crossing a world and not have a desolate dead zone on the other side? They'll definitely come. As long as any one of my brothers comes, you humans will be finished. You won't even be able to protect yourself. Lianping thought of the difference between the appearance of the monsters and Higram's arrival, which was almost 2 years. He could not help but ask, I've already killed all the people you sent this time. How long do you think it will take for them to come back next time? Higram frowned and seemed to be hesitating. This was very important information, but thinking that Gabe would also be questioned, and Lianping had just eaten Gabe's arm, he closed his eyes and said, according to your timing rules, it'll be about a year to a year and a half. A year to a year and a half? Thinking of this, Lianping raised his head and looked toward the south of the western continent. We have to hurry. Then, let's unify Earth first. 4 hours ago, that was when the psychic energy incarnation was still fighting with Higram in space. In the Grand Canyon in the north of the Federation, a man was carrying a boy who looked to be only 2 or 3 years old on his back, heading toward the depths of the Great Canyon. The two of them were Night Beast Monk Shang Tian, who had escaped from Xia Dragonfinch. However, why would the two of them appear in the Great Canyon in the north of the Federation at this very moment? Night Beast looked at the surrounding cliffs filled with strange rocks and mumbled, Xiao Tian, are you sure you want to come here? The terrain of this place is too terrible. Once Xia Laikong and the others come chasing after us, it'll be hard for us to escape. Hearing Night Beast's words, it seemed that during this period of time, when the two of them were on the run, Shang Tian, a 2-year-old child, would be the one making the decisions. Shang Tian said in a clear child's voice, don't worry, Uncle Knight. Xiao Laikong and the others don't have the time to care about us right now. But what's the use of us coming here? We're looking for someone. He might be our last hope. Shang Tian's eyes exuded a vicissitude that far surpassed his age. It was as if countless memories were flashing in his eyes. Compared to the last time he had appeared, it was as if he had grown up many years in a short period of time. The current Lianping is no longer someone we can deal with. Therefore, we've come here to look for him. Night Beast asked, Xiao Tian, your talent is very strong. There's no need to be in such a hurry to take revenge. I believe that as long as you work hard, you'll definitely be able to surpass Lianping in 10 or 20 years' time. Shang Tian shook his head. I won't be able to surpass him. That monster's rate of improvement far surpasses our imagination. But at the very least, there's still time. The current Lianping should only have started researching electromagnetic forces. Once he completes quantization, it'll really be too late. By then, we won't have any means of killing him. Quantization. Night Beast was a university graduate after all. Although he did not major in physics, he had heard of this term before. He asked, you're saying that he can turn his body into many quantum particles? If that's the case, although it'll be hard to kill him, his essence is still energy, right? It's not impossible to kill him. Shang Tian let out a sigh. It's not like that. Quantization is just an abbreviation. By then, he won't be anywhere, yet he will also be everywhere. It's a little like the wave function of electrons, like the cloud of probabilities. However, we won't have any means of observing him. And this is probably not the end of his evolution. However, even if it's just this step, he'll have already become an existence that we'll never be able to kill. Yisho was confused by Shang Tian's words, but a young man's voice continued to speak. You're saying that the man by the name of Li Onping will become a god? The man who had appeared had a buzz cut and was wearing a strange ethnic costume. A gust of wind blew in the valley, and his body emitted clanking sounds. Night Beast looked warily at the young man with the buzz cut who had suddenly appeared. However, Shang Tian, who was on his back, smiled and answered the young man's question. No, he's even more terrifying than a god. He'll become the nightmare of all living creatures in the multivariate universe, becoming the ultimate. While Shang Tian was speaking, the young man with the brush cut echoed his words. The two of them seemed to speak in unison. Omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. Omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. However, the young man's tone was one of doubt, while Shang Tian's was one of certainty. Fervor appeared in the young man's eyes, while Shang Tian heaved a sigh of relief. He clenched his small fists tightly, and a hint of determination flashed in his eyes. If this is fate, then this Li Onping, the devil released by our clan, will be buried by me with my own hands. Sensing that the young man's killing intent had gradually dissipated due to his words, Shang Tian said, Higram isn't the only one who's discovered you. Li Onping has also discovered you. If I hadn't come to look for you, you'd have been killed by him 4 hours later. 4 hours later, which was now. After temporarily ending Hygram's interrogation, Li Onping's body appeared in the sky above the Great Canyon. A hint of confusion appeared in his eyes. The spiritual imprint I planted on that spy's body has disappeared here. His powerful spiritual force field was like a radar, scanning through every inch of the Great Canyon bit by bit. Then with a flash, Li Onping's figure appeared in the deepest part of the canyon, where Violet had been excavating. However, this place had already been cleaned up by Violet after the incident, and there weren't too many traces left behind. Some of the shattered remains were reassembled in Li Onping's mind, allowing him to see Violet's imprint once again. Then with another flash, Li Onping's figure appeared in the grotto that Violet had used all sorts of methods to collect blood to open up. However, not only had all the murals been cleaned up, even the giant statue had disappeared. The only trace left behind in the entire area was Violet's imprint. Chapter 348. In a hospital in the Federation, a luxurious ward had been transformed into a temporary command room. In short, there's no room for discussion on this matter. If you don't agree, I'll just withdraw from the virtual machine. Woody, who had already deactivated his transformation, said these words to Judith Arnold in front of him. He then pushed the door open and strode out the door. Judith's trusted assistant walked in cautiously. Looking at Judith's uncertain expression, the assistant asked softly, Sir, is it still about Carmen? Judith sighed deeply. She only felt that the building was about to collapse, and it was difficult for a single tree to support the situation. It's nothing. How are they doing? She was asking about Yin Bei, who was sent to the hospital. The assistant said, Xiao Laikong and Jing Guang are still accompanying Yin Bei. Yin Bei has already finished the operation. According to the doctor, with his physique, he should be able to recover in 2 to 3 weeks. What about Tony Abel? He has a large number of fractures all over his body. His life is no longer in danger. His sister is accompanying him. Seeing that the assistant was a little restless, Judith said impatiently, What other news is there? Tell me all at once. More than an hour ago, we detected multiple earthquakes of magnitude 6 to 8 in the dead zone in the northern part of the Code State. The assistant said with a solemn expression, According to the detection results of the drone and satellite images, I'm afraid that the battle between Li Onping and the monster has already ended. Is that so? Hearing this news, Judith's brows furrowed deeply. Her heart was full of contradictions. She hoped that Lianping would die, but she also hoped that the monster would die. Of course, the best outcome would be for the two monsters to perish together, but this was obviously very unlikely. At this moment, the pupils of Judith and the assistant shrank at the same time. They both turned around and looked at the window in the room with a vigilant expression. A human figure, completely composed of psychic energy, was floating quietly there. Lianping. When Judith's gaze swept over the little Higram on the chest of the psychic energy incarnation, a trace of shock flashed through her eyes. No one knew what she was thinking. Lianping naturally had no interest in understanding what she was thinking. He merely put out 3 fingers toward Judy and said calmly, 3 days. I'll give the Federation and the imaginary agency a total of 3 days to surrender. 3 days later, I'll personally make a trip to the Federation's president's office. After saying that, the Nyenchi incarnation looked at Judy deeply before disappearing in a flash. When the assistant saw that the Nyenchi body had disappeared, his legs gave way, and he could not help but fall to the ground. They didn't know if it was because of the other party's fame, the strength that the other party had displayed, or the aura that Lianping had displayed just now was too shocking. He felt as if he was dancing on the edge of a blade, as if his life and death were no longer in his own hands. Judith's expression did not seem to have changed much, but her shirt, which was soaked in cold sweat, showed that she was clearly not as calm as she appeared. Just then, the door was opened once again. A member of the imaginary agency rushed in and shouted, "Madam, the intensive care unit." The 3 ability users in the intensive care unit have all disappeared. Judith naturally knew that Lianping had probably taken her subordinates away. She waved her hand impatiently and said, "Got it. You can leave now." She was still considering what Lianping had said earlier. Surrender within 3 days? What a joke. Do you think the Federation is like 100 months? I'll drown in their spittle just by telling them this news. She suddenly frowned. Seeing that the member had yet to leave, she asked, "Is there anything else?" The member shook his head and threw a strange glance at Judith before quickly leaving. Just as Judith felt that it was strange, the assistant beside her pointed at her forehead. "Madam, your head." Judith's expression changed. She touched her forehead, and her hand was covered in blood. She did not know when a wound had appeared between her eyebrows. She did not need to think to know that this was Lianping's threat to her. This bastard. Next, Lianping sent Xia Laikong and the other 2 back to the Xia. As for himself, he stayed behind and waited for the Federation's response. As for the peeping Tom that Lianping had been tracking, as well as the clues about Violet left behind in the canyon, Lianping did not plan to care about them for now. The most important thing was still to unify the entire human race and increase his own strength in preparation for the next attack of the demon race. Originally, Lianping wanted to use the peaceful method to prevent unnecessary internal friction and casualties. He wanted to use the psychic energy incarnation to possess Tony Abel's body and slowly devour the entire Federation before finally unifying the Western continent. However, the information about the demons had far exceeded Lianping's expectations. There was no time for him to peacefully unify, so he chose to use the fastest and most violent method to rule the Western continent. Naturally, this method would have many side effects, but Lianping couldn't care less about it now. After all, the crisis of the demons was imminent. According to Higram, the fighting power of the demons was just like what Blackett said. There were a total of 10 levels, which was 5 levels higher than the 5 levels of the human race. Under the same level of energy, the fighting power of the demons was stronger than normal human ability users. For example, Fabrizio's strength was the standard 5th level among the demons. However, when facing humans, he could fight against 2 to 3 5th level ability users alone. If there was no ability to restrain him, he could even win. Hygram's strength had just entered the 7th level. With his fighting power alone, if he did not meet Lianping, he could wipe out all the human forces on Earth with his eyes closed. Not to mention the 8th and 9th level demon powerhouses. According to Higram and Gabe, The strongest demons were the 7 ninth-level demon gods. They were the 7 surviving demon gods of the so-called 12 demon gods. These 7 demon gods were divided into 2 factions. Normally, they would restrict each other in the White Land, or they would be responsible for attacking some particularly powerful foreign worlds. Before they confirmed the danger and value of Earth, they would not personally make a move. The next demon that was sent over might be a 7th or 8th level monster. No matter which one it would definitely be much stronger than Higram, who had just entered the 7th level. Liamping did some calculations. Although he had the 6th level spirit force field and his own 5th level ability, he had already walked a new path. This path of evolution that belonged to him was based on his ability and human knowledge. His strength could no longer be judged simply by the ability levels of the 2 abilities he possessed. In terms of ability level, because he had the 6th level spirit force field, he could be considered a 6th level ability user. However, in terms of performance, his main body's fighting power was around the 7th level, which was higher than Hygram's. Meanwhile, his psychic incarnation was around the 6th level, which was higher than Heaven Queen's. In order to deal with the demon crisis, he needed even greater strength. Chapter 349. 2 days later, in the morning, Liamping stood on the street in front of the president's office. Zhu Di and a group of ability users from the virtual machine were following behind him. There were still traces of smoke and dried blood on the surrounding streets. This was the result of the anti-surrenders who had led the soldiers to attack the president's office. The ability users behind Liamping and the soldiers who had taken over the various checkpoints on the streets were the people of the Federation who had surrendered. According to Zhu Di's statistics, about 80% of the Federation's forces had chosen to surrender. This was due to the high degree of control that the Federation's ability user clans had over power. It was also due to the invincible power that Liamping had displayed several times. As for the remaining 20% of the forces, they were completely out of control. They raised the banner of righteousness high and would fight for the Federation's independence. They had even temporarily occupied some second-tier cities in the Federation. Liamping did not care who these people were, what kind of power they had, or how they would resist him. These were things that his subordinates should do. He raised his hands, and a large amount of materials placed on the street flew up. These were the materials that he had asked Zhu Di to prepare over the past few days for the sake of building the warp gate today. He did not have that much time to spend on the unification of the Western continent. Naturally, he would leave this matter to his subordinates. Countless materials moved rapidly, transformed, and reassembled in front of him. A strange building that was alternating between blue and yellow slowly unfolded on the street in front of the president's office like a bouquet of flowers. The blueprint of the warp gate was stored in Liamping's brain. The building that was extremely complicated for ordinary people was as simple as putting together blocks of building blocks for him. Countless metal threads broke out from the surface of the metal building like plants and trees breaking out from the ground. They overlapped and intertwined with each other before drilling into the ground like electric wires. They were connected to the Federation's power grid. In a short 15 minutes, a blue light gradually lit up, and a simple warp gate was completed under Liamping's control. Then, with a flash of blue light, a man's figure gradually appeared before the warp gate. Bai Xinghe opened his eyes and looked around. Then, he lowered his head and said to Liamping, "Your Majesty." As Liamping had informed him in advance, he had been waiting at the center of the space warp gate in Tianjing. Liamping nodded and said, "I'll give you a month's time. You can use all the forces on the Western continent and all the aptitude users on the Eastern continent except the RAS. If you need my support, you can also contact me. I only have one request. After 1 month, all of my orders must be unimpeded throughout the entire Western continent." Bai Xinghe put on a confident smile. "I understand, Your Majesty." Behind Liamping, there was a trace of unwillingness in Zhu Di's eyes, but she didn't dare to show it. Before she surrendered, she had already thought about it. Liamping wouldn't completely trust surrenderers like them. He would definitely use his own subordinates to take over them. Only after a period of time would they be able to slowly integrate into Liamping's forces. Li Onping didn't say anything else. He directly walked past Bai Xinghe and walked towards the warp gate. Then, he disappeared in a flash of blue light. Bai Xinghe had been an emperor in the past, and he was one of the strongest among the level 5 aptitude users. Apart from Tyrell, almost all of the level 5 aptitude users in the human world were either killed by Li Onping or dead. Add to that the fact that Xia had been developing Li Onping and the Federation's allegiance over the past 2 years. Li Onping believed that even without him, it was only a matter of time before the Western continent was unified. After Li Onping disappeared, members of Xia Dragonfinch and Xia's officials appeared on the Federation's land through the Warp Gate one after another. They would reform the Federation's government structure, take over the management of the army and aptitude users, eliminate all opposition forces, and turn the entire Western continent into Li Onping's territory. After Li Onping handed over the matter of unifying the Western continent to Bai Xinghe, he didn't care about it for the time being. He directly activated the warp gate and arrived at Tianjing's warp center. Then, he switched to another warp gate and arrived at New Danyang. In the valley where he had previously secluded himself, all kinds of trucks, cranes, forklifts, and monsters were busy. They were transporting all kinds of materials here according to Li Onping's instructions. How are the materials? Sherwin followed behind Li Onping. Hearing this, he replied, "The materials that you requested us to prepare, we have already prepared them. However, Your Majesty, the materials you've brought here." Although he could already guess what Li Onping was going to do when he saw the list of materials that Li Onping had requested, he couldn't figure out why. Li Onping looked at the valley that looked like a construction site. Many huge containers were neatly placed on a cleared space. His powerful mental energy swept past those containers, and a list of materials appeared in Li Onping's mind. They matched the requirements that he had asked for in his memory and were as accurate as a supercomputer. Double the amount of U-235. Boron carbide, silverindium cadmium, and heavy water are also missing. Demote the person in charge by 1 level. Sherwin immediately nodded in agreement. He felt bad for the person in charge and the person in charge of these materials. Li Onping's request was too urgent. Ordinary people, even if they were aptitude users, were not supercomputers. When it came to transporting materials, it was very likely that they would be slightly off. However, Li Onping could see through a glance. No subordinate could hide it from him. After checking the materials, Li Onping began to answer Sherwin's question. "I'm going to build a nuclear reactor here." Sherwin was shocked. "Here? But the nuclear power plants in the East Continent are enough for the next 50 years. The materials here are enough to build hundreds of reactors." There is something that Sherwin didn't say, which was that if Your Majesty made a mistake in the operation here, half of Danyang would be blown up. Li Onping smiled and ignored Sherwin's shock. The West Continent had been temporarily handed over to Li Onping. Unless there was a problem that they couldn't solve, Li Onping wouldn't care. What he needed to do next was to improve his strength. Electromagnetic force was the essence of physical strength. Physical strength was just a derivation of electromagnetic force. The nuclear reactor that Li Onping built in New Danyang was to replenish more energy for his body. It was too slow for him to strengthen the electromagnetic force in his body with his own strength. To further perfect the electromagnetic force in his body, he needed more electrons and energy. The superposition of the abilities of Black and the Queen of Sky, together with the knowledge that mankind had accumulated over thousands of years, allowed Li Onping to walk on his own path of strength. Chapter 350. In the Valley of New Eastern Sun, Li Onping was operating all kinds of materials by himself, building nuclear reactors. All kinds of materials were dancing in the air, transforming, and reassembling. It looked like a construction site that had been sped up 100 times. Over 20 reactors were being built by Li Onping at the same time. During the construction process, Li Onping began to think about the demons and his own strength at the same time. According to the information Li Onping obtained from Higram and Gabu, from the 5th energy level onwards, the difference in strength between each energy level would become greater and greater. It could be said to be like the difference between heaven and earth. Because every species and individual had different abilities, their strength, speed, destructive power, defensive power, distance, recovery power, and other combat attributes were different at each energy level. The only thing that could differentiate their energy levels and widen the decisive difference in combat strength was the experience of the demon race accumulated over countless years. First, the sixth energy level was the same as what Heaven Empress had imagined, a choice between material and spiritual. Turning oneself into a spiritual body like Heaven Empress was walking the path of the spiritual realm. Meanwhile, those like Hygram who had no soul and only had a material body were walking the path of the material realm. Regardless of which path one took, based on the difference in ability, even if one chose the same path, the result and combat strength will be different. For example, Hygram's race was the evil god race that the Red River King of the 12 demon gods belonged to. This race didn't have a soul after birth, only leaving behind a purely material body that was harder than diamond. Even if they didn't train much, they would still have the strength of the 5th energy level when they reached adulthood. However, the evil god race was very few in number. Including the Red River King, there were no more than 50 of them. If the 5th energy level was to modify the body and retain some of the original creature's characteristics, then the 6th energy level was to completely transform into a different kind of creature, starting a new evolution. It was just like how going from 0 energy level to the 1st energy level required the use of psychic energy. If one wanted to go from the 6th energy level to the 7th energy level, they had to combine their body and ability, completely fusing their psychic energy into their ability, making their body purer and closer to the essence, understanding what their own ability was. As for the 8th energy level, they would use their own ability to obtain immortality. Any creature that reached the 8th energy level would forever be far from death. Unless a creature at the 9th energy level personally made a move, there would be nothing that could kill them. Once you reach the 9th rank, even other 9th rank creatures won't be able to kill you. Therefore, even though there were only 7 demon gods left in the Land of White due to a legendary internal strife, the other 5 demon gods were only sealed, exiled, or temporarily deprived of their powers. However, they definitely wouldn't die. Liamping had always thought that he had killed Black, but that was just a mistake. For example, Black and Gray, in order to prevent themselves from being sealed by other demon gods, they scattered their bodies and banished themselves to many worlds. What Liamping destroyed was only a part of them. After receiving this information, Liamping was even more aware of how terrifying the demons were. As the peak of the White Land, the 7 demon gods were at the 9th energy rank. Their strength was already beyond Hygram's comprehension. In fact, apart from the 12 demon gods, no other creature in the White Land had ever reached the 9th energy rank. After learning about the strength of the demons from Hygram, Liamping was even more certain of one fact. It was impossible for Black or the Queen of Heaven to defeat those demons. He had to carve out a path of his own. A path of power that was even more powerful than the 10 great levels of the demons. It's not impossible, Liamping thought. He listened to Hygram's narration. Although he could imagine how powerful the demons were, they gave him the feeling that they were like the magicians or warriors in novels. Their strength came from their innate talent or from the accumulation of experience. They didn't truly understand and study all the mysteries in a systematic way. They knew how, but didn't know why. What Liamping was doing now, using the spiritual force field and the force field of nothingness as a springboard, relying on a supercomputer-like brain to develop all kinds of applications, benefited from the difference between humans and demons. Knowledge or science, by truly understanding the mysteries of the world, using systematic and scientific methods to increase one's strength, and not the countless years of experience passed down by demons or the instincts of their bodies. This was the starting point of the superpowers of humans and demons, but it went beyond the category of superpowers and gradually became a new power system, one that might be even more powerful than the 10 great levels. For his first stage, Liamping named it electromagnetic drive. All the activities and reactions of the human body were completed by the electromagnetic force between the molecules. To be able to use the electromagnetic force to push one's physical strength and even freely control all the reactions in one's body was the ultimate goal of this stage. Only when one reached electromagnetic drive could one be said to have truly grasped the essence of the human body's strength. In terms of efficiency, through strengthening the electromagnetic force and control of the body's atoms, the efficiency was millions of times higher than simply training the muscles. Even a powerless human would have the strength to move mountains and seas once they reached this stage, and could even control all kinds of reactions in the body to obtain all kinds of inconceivable power. Unfortunately, apart from Lianping himself, there was no way for others to smoothly reach this stage. Be it the nihility force field or the spiritual force field, they were already very rare. What was even rarer was Li Anping's brain, which could process the entire body's minute data down to the level of atoms at every moment. The next stage of Li Anping's plan was what he called matter recombination. After completing the foundation of using the electromagnetic force to completely control all the atoms in one's body, one could recombine any matter one understood, and even recombine one's entire body in the end. Unlike the original recovery using soul power, it could be recombined purely on one's own. However, the biggest problem was recombining one's brain, or rather, recombining one's consciousness. Lianping still had not come up with a specific solution. But as long as I can reach the stage of freely recombining my consciousness, my combat strength will take a new leap, and I should be able to fight against the 8th level demons. Lianping waved his hand, and a lump of metal turned into liquid in his hand, which was then evenly distributed to the 20 reactors in front of him. As for the third stage after achieving matter recombination, I only have some ideas but no specific plans. Lianping looked at the 20 reactors in front of him and the world in front of him. All kinds of forces, rays, and atoms were reflected in his eyes. I need to understand more knowledge, and understand more of the mysteries of this world. 2 days later, Lianping stayed in New Dongyang, building nuclear reactors and completing the upgrade of his electromagnetic drive, while absorbing all kinds of knowledge and thinking about the next step. In the Western continent, the situation had changed over the past few days. First, the federal government officially announced that the Federation would join the Pan-Continent Alliance, and from then on, it would completely accept the leadership of Xia's emperor, Li Anping. As soon as the news came out, it caused an uproar in all walks of life. People came out to organize demonstrations in cities all over the country, and many large guilds even went on strike to protest the stupid actions of the government. However, they were then ruthlessly suppressed. Xia Dragonfinch's subordinates were more used to dealing with such things than the virtual numeral service. It was especially so for Bai Xinghe, who used to be an emperor himself. He could not understand the demonstrations and strikes at all. In his eyes, they were the cries of the weak. While the resistance was suppressed, 21 cities in the Federation declared independence at the same time. They all belonged to the 3 families of the anti-capitulationists. Bai Xinghe left the relatively mild work of suppressing the demonstrations and strikes to the virtual numeral service and the federal army. The governance and reform of the government were left to the civil servants sent by Wang Chong. As for himself, he took Xia Laikong, Jingguang, and Emma to the few cities that declared their independence in person. In a high-speed passenger plane, the 4 of them sat opposite each other. Emma chewed her gum while looking at Bai Xinghe in front of her and said, "Is it necessary? The 4 of us will go together." Bai Xinghe sneered. Human beings can be very stupid. Sometimes they will fight you for wealth and power, even if you put a knife to their neck. This time, I plan to treat it as a deterrent. After all, our target is the entire Western continent. In order to reduce the resistance in the future, let's make it more grand this time. Xia Laikong nodded. I agree with that. When the time comes, the 4 of us will take action together. However, this city belongs to the House of Florence, so we only need to deal with their people. Don't cause too many casualties among the civilians. While the 3 of them were talking, Jingguang knocked on the window next to their seats and said, "My lords, They seem to have come to greet us. Should I take action? No, I'll do it. Emma walked to the window and looked too. If the three of you take action, chances are that the plane will be destroyed. On the clouds outside the window, two missiles were roaring toward the direction of the passenger plane. However, with a snap of Emma's fingers, a teleportation gate suddenly appeared in front of the missiles. One of the missiles instantly entered the gate and appeared in front of the other. The two missiles collided and exploded into a large cluster of sparks in the sky. Emma blew a bubble with the gum in her mouth and said, "Done." Bai Xinghe looked at the tablet in his hand. The location of the plane was displayed on it. "All right, we're almost there. It will be dangerous if we get close to the plane. I'll ask the pilot to go back. Let's set off from here." Hearing that, Jin Guang was the first to walk to the door, followed by Xiao Laikong. Emma stretched her back and followed them. As the door of the plane opened, a gust of wind blew in. Bai Xinghe shouted, "Let's go. Follow the plan we agreed on earlier." Then, Jin Guang was the first to jump out. Golden aura surged all over his body, and he flew toward the city with his people. Then it was Xiao Liekong's turn. His body was surrounded by several violent streams of air, and his entire body flew out like a tornado. As for Emma, she stepped out of the cabin door and entered the black teleportation gate. In the next moment, she appeared in the sky. Bai Xinghe was the last. He stepped out of the cabin and drew out the original sword of Tatsuka from his waist. The sword vibrated slightly, and as the gravitational force changed, Bai Xinghe was already floating in midair. Then, with a flash, he flew out as well. As the four of them moved at high speed, they passed through the clouds in the blink of an eye and arrived in the sky above a huge city. However, as soon as they appeared, countless anti-air cannons and missiles on the ground were already aimed at them. A large number of bullets hit Jin Guang first. However, the silver wrist guards on his hands vibrated slightly and activated the level 5 ability, Molecular Stagnation, which was one of the 108 swords of Tatsuka. Countless bullets exploded on the surface of his body. However, other than slowing down his flying speed, they were unable to cause any harm to him. As for the other 3 level 5 ability users, attacks of this level could not even break through their aura defense. Looking at the densely packed army on the ground, Emma cheered and drew out a silver harp. It was the Harp of Death, one of the 108 swords of Tatsuka. As Emma's fingertips slowly plucked the harp strings, terrifying infrasonic waves scattered from the sky to the ground. This terrifying demonic sound, which did not weaken at all, covered most of the soldiers on the ground. No matter if they were hiding behind armor plates or wearing multiple layers of protection, all the soldiers who were hit by the infrasonic waves instantly fell to the ground and could not get up. More than half of the soldiers were wiped out without destroying any buildings. Infrasonic waves were indeed very useful in modern warfare. However, with Emma's attack, there was indeed a great disturbance among the enemy's ground troops. But soon, over 10 ability users who could fly soared into the sky from the crowd and headed toward the 4 of them. Bai Xinghe glanced at the ability users and said directly, "I'll go and capture the head of the Florence family and the elders first. You guys go and wipe out all the rebels." After saying that, he did not wait for Jin Guang and the others to reply. With a flash, he accelerated and flew away. Xiao Laikong glanced at Bai Xinghe's back. Bai Xinghe had already turned into a small black dot. Xiao Laikong smiled and said, "He really likes to fight. Is he going to directly challenge the strongest?" Although Bai Xinghe had volunteered to become Li Anping's subordinate, his pursuit of power and his preference for fighting against the strong had not changed. After glancing at Bai Xinghe, Xiao Laikong turned to look at the ability users on the other side. His eyes were already filled with cold light. Then let's speed up a little as well. The next moment, a bolt of lightning suddenly appeared in the clouds. A storm suddenly swept through the originally calm sky. Amidst the flashing lightning and rumbling thunder, several tornadoes that were over 100 meters thick rushed toward the ability users who were charging over and the remaining troops on the ground. 5 hours later, the Florence family and the 6 cities that they had taken over had all fallen. Not a single member of the family of 203 was spared. The head of the family, Casa Florence, had his fair and plump body chopped into thousands of pieces by Xinghe's extreme punishment. This caused a great uproar in the entire Western continent. Chapter 351. Xinghe's operation greatly reduced the number of people who were rioting in the Federation. But for the diehards, it only intensified the conflict between the two parties. In the following days, the two parties had more than 10 conflicts in the Federation. However, faced with Xinghe, Xia Laikong, Emma, Woody, and Judy, who were all level 5 experts, the resistance army was forced to retreat and almost collapsed. In only 4 days, Xinghe had conquered 21 cities and caused the death of more than 200 aptitude users. More than 5,000 soldiers of the resistance army were sacrificed. The failure on the battlefield forced the resistance forces of the Federation to unite. Even many foreign forces in the Western continent were dissatisfied with Li Onping's tyranny and began to sponsor the resistance army from various sources. On the 5th night of the war, the resistance army finally resorted to their last resort. A nuclear bomb with a yield of more than 10 million was launched at Embark, the largest city in the east of the Federation, causing more than 2 million casualties. Emma, the target of the nuclear bomb, was the Xia Dragonfinch. Although she managed to avert the disaster in the end, she was still covered in dust. The leadership of Xia, especially Xinghe, was infuriated. He ordered the confiscation of all the nuclear bombs in the Federation. The huge casualties caused by the almost terrorist attack shocked the whole world. Alexander, the current highest leader of the resistance army, was criticized by the media. Therefore, Xinghe's methods became more and more unscrupulous. While a large number of civilians were sacrificed, the space for the resistance army's activities was greatly reduced. On the 7th day of the war, the remaining 2,000 people of the resistance army and their leader, Alexander, were driven to the Yarrow Plain in the west of the Federation by Xinghe. Xinghe, Xia Laikong, Emma, Woody, and Judy took action together and finally launched the final encirclement of the resistance army. The blast that spread for several kilometers swept across the Yarrow Plain like a storm. Facing the 5th energy rank ability users, the resistance army had no way of resisting. On the plain, Woody looked at the tanks that were firing at him non-stop. He was not moved at all. Several armor-piercing bullets were blocked by his psychic energy before they could reach him. Beside him, Judy Arnold didn't use any ability either. She only used her psychic energy to protect herself. Only when the rebels got too close to her would she use her psychic energy to crush their heads. As for the tanks that ran away after firing a few shots, she couldn't even be bothered to chase after them. Although the two of them had joined Li Onping, they were obviously unwilling to kill their former colleagues. As for why, the two of them might have different reasons. At this moment, Judith suddenly covered his ears with one hand. The news from the headset made him frown. Alexander has been caught. Hearing this, Woody sighed and looked at the end of the plane in front of him with some loneliness. In front of Xinghe was a room that was soaked in blood. All kinds of soldiers, aptitude users, and high-level officials had been cut into countless pieces by him with the sword of Tatsuka. The whole room was like a slaughterhouse. In front of him was an old man with white hair. He was sitting on a chair and did not seem to notice the bloody scene in front of him at all. Instead, he seemed to be looking at Xinghe with a cold smile, as if he were the victor. Xinghe frowned and pointed his saber at Alexander. "Do you have anything else to say? Don't worry. I won't kill you immediately. After I bring you back, you'll be of more use." Alexander laughed wildly. "Do you think you've won?" He looked at the level 5 aptitude user in front of him with a mocking expression. "While you're wasting your time here, all 33 phase bombs have been fired 500 kilometers away. Let's die together." Hearing Alexander's words, Xinghe said in disbelief, "That's impossible. All the nuclear weapons of the Federation should have been recovered by us." Halfway through his words, the news from the headset made his expression change. After a sniff, Xinghe knocked Alexander out with his palm and rushed out of the room with him. The 3-phase bomb was a hydrogen bomb whose energy release process was fission, fusion, and fission. Because of the virtuous cycle of nuclear fusion and fission, it boasted the power of both a hydrogen bomb and an atomic bomb. However, while it was powerful, the three-phase bomb was also a dirty bomb. After the explosion, the radioactive particles would spread into the air and cause serious radioactive pollution. More seriously, if the three-phase bombs were detonated in other countries, a chain reaction of nuclear bombs would be triggered. The whole Earth might be caught in a terrible nuclear winter. In the valley of New Danyang, Yang Guang rushed out of the Thunderbird 3 carrier and ran toward where Li Onping was. Because they did not know the plan of the mental network, they all thought that they had to go to Li Onping in person if they wanted to contact him. In front of Yang Guang, there were all kinds of instruments that he could not recognize at all. The valley that was supposed to be a paradise seemed to have turned into a supermodern laboratory at this moment. Even the ground had been completely covered in metal and cement. In the deepest part of the instruments, Li Onping, who was surrounded by electric arcs, was floating in the air with his legs crossed. In front of him were countless flashing screens. However, when Yang Guang was about to rush over, a gentle force pushed him back. In the meantime, the air in front of him suddenly twisted. Then, as countless tiny particles of different colors changed, Li Onping appeared in front of him. Yang Guang looked at Li Onping in front of him in a daze, and then at Li Onping, who was floating in midair and surrounded by electric arcs. It's just a virtual projection. The Li Onping in front of him moved his mouth, and a voice was transmitted into Yang Guang's ears through the vibrations in the air. It's just a simple interference and diffraction of light with the help of some lasers. After a brief explanation, he looked at Yang Guang's confused face and said calmly, "What's the matter?" Yang Guang swallowed. For some reason, the Li Onping in front of him made him feel a chill in his heart. However, he still remembered his mission. He opened his mouth and said, "Your Majesty, the rebels of the Federation have launched 33-phase missiles. Bai Xinghe and the rest have tried their best to stop them, but 19 three-phase missiles were successfully launched. They're flying toward several countries in the Western continent and the Eastern continent. They hope to receive your support." After Yang Guang finished speaking, he was very nervous. Although they were very confident in Li Onping's strength, they were not 100% sure that he could stop the catastrophe in front of them. Got it. When he heard the three-phase missiles, Li Onping frowned, but his expression did not change much. It was as if he had heard that his kitten or puppy was relieving itself on the bed. Although he was not happy about it, he was not worried. Li Onping's eyes flashed with electric arcs. The next moment, high-frequency electromagnetic waves moving at the speed of light swept across the entire planet's surface and 36,000 kilometers above it in 125 seconds. 19. Found them. Chapter 352. Valley in New Danyang. Li Onping's body was constantly improving his strength under the electric current that was enough to supply the entire continent. Electromagnetic drive is almost complete. The next step is material recombination. If I want to be able to compete with those demons, I have to achieve material reorganization or even the next stage of power. During this period of time, in addition to learning all kinds of knowledge and improving his electromagnetic power, Li Onping's psychic avatar had also inquired more and more about the demons from Hygram. The other party's strength was stronger than he had previously estimated. In front of Li Onping's eyes, a formula appeared on the screen. The formula's content was as follows: psi 8, pi caret 2, mh caret 2, ev, psi equals 0. This was the famous wave function equation in the scientific world. It represented the wave nature of matter. It was simple, elegant, and classic. On the other screen next to Li Onping, there were table-like squares and another formula: PQ, QP equals H2 pi I. This was the content of matrix mechanics, which was more inclined to the particle nature of matter. It was complex, profound, and completely mathematically observed the world. Was matter a wave or a particle? In the past, this was a topic that had lasted for hundreds of years in the scientific world. But now, there was already a conclusion that it was both a wave and a particle. Liaoping wanted to be able to reorganize matter at will, and the wave-particle duality was a foundation. He could use electromagnetic force to manipulate molecules, atoms, and electrons on a macroscopic scale. But to complete material reorganization, he had to enter the microscopic world, a bizarre world full of wonderful ideas, the world of quantum mechanics. Before an electron is observed, it's always in a superimposed state, diffusing in the entire space in the form of a wave function. It can appear in any position of a composite wave function. Only when I observe him will he collapse, turning into a point in a probabilistic manner of a composite wave function. This is one of the fundamental moments of quantum mechanics, uncertainty. But even I can't observe the state of the electron before it collapses. This isn't a problem of observation methods, but a theoretical limitation. But what is observation? Is it the so-called consciousness? Thinking up to this point, Liaoping felt that he had returned to the end point of material reorganization and consciousness reorganization. What exactly was consciousness? At this moment, the doctor in the central city had already started to contact the Heavenly Queen's clone, and the Heavenly Queen's clone transmitted the information to Liaoping's brain through a mental connection. Your Majesty, can we start today's test? Liaoping did not answer. Instead, he asked, Doctor, what do you think consciousness is? It doesn't have to be philosophical, but from a physical perspective. Consciousness. The doctor was stunned for a moment, but he immediately gave his opinion. The so-called consciousness comes from the brain, right? And the closest thing to a brain in this world is probably a computer made by humans. The doctor smiled and pushed down the glasses on his nose bridge. The so-called consciousness might be a special structure that creates an extremely complicated set of algorithms and rules. Just like a computer, it can obtain different outputs based on different inputs. The reason why the human brain is different from a computer is that the algorithms of the human brain are countless times more complicated. This allows the human brain to have a strong learning ability and be able to continuously increase its intelligence. It's just like clones. Although we're unable to create a brain, we can clone them. Facts have proven that clones also have consciousness. Then do you think that after disassembling and reassembling a brain, it would still be the same person? Faced with Liaoping's question, the doctor gave it some thought, but did not give an answer. In a glass container, the Heavenly Queen's clone moved her lips and said calmly, Forget it. Let's continue with today's test. We might be able to find the answer from the mental network test. The doctor nodded and started to operate the equipment next to him. At the next moment, the clone's mental energy field spread out in all directions. Correspondingly, thousands of clones in the central capital also released their spiritual force fields, covering the entire city center with their spiritual force fields. Xian walked out of the subway and looked at the pedestrians coming and going on the street. It seemed that everyone had a knowing smile on their faces. However, he could only feel a chill in his heart. Since half a month ago, an unknown change had occurred in the central city. Yes, unknown because only Xian could sense it. No one knew when, but there were no beggars on the street. Everyone you met on the road greeted you with a smile. In the company, from the sweeping Annie to the CEO, everyone was working hard and learning. It was as if they had become characters in a novel. They were kind, upright, enthusiastic, and intelligent. But the more they were like this, the more strange it made Xian feel. Xian saw with his own eyes that the swindler who had cheated him of his money actually personally delivered the money to him and apologized to him while crying bitterly. What made Xian feel even more horrified was that there seemed to be a lock in everyone's mind, including his. As long as they left the central city, they would completely forget about the abnormalities that happened here. He tried to leave the central city through the space warp gate many times, but in the end, he felt that he had inexplicably returned. What's wrong with this world? Xian felt that he seemed to be more and more incompatible with this world. Hi, Xian, what are you thinking about? A beautiful white-collar urban woman patted Xian's shoulder from behind. And Mary, good morning. Xian looked at the mature beauty in front of him nervously. This was his boss in the company. She was famous for being strict and picky, but now she was greeting him like a big sister next door. "Nya Xian, you haven't been focused on your work recently. Is there a problem at home?" Nya Xian looked at the beauty in front of him who was concerned about him. His eyes accidentally glanced at the unfathomable snow-white chest of the other party. He muttered, "Oh my Buddha," in his heart, but he replied, "It's nothing. I just didn't sleep well." Mary smiled sweetly. "That's good. I know you live alone. If you have any difficulties, feel free to call me." Seeing Mary's pretty back, Nya Xian gulped. "There's a problem. There's definitely a problem." At this moment, a harsh sound rang out in his mind. Nya Xian rubbed his forehead and said in a deep voice, "It's coming again." This was a sound that only he could hear after the mutation. It was like an ear-piercing chirp that was rolling in his mind. What was even stranger was that he was the only one who could hear this sound. No one else seemed to be able to feel it at all. Usually, Nya Xian would silently endure this chirp in his mind, but today, for some reason, his curiosity was aroused. Perhaps it was the need to vent after many days of suppression, or perhaps it was the fear of the changes in the world. Today, he decided to take a look in the direction of the chirp. He turned around and returned to the subway station. Looking at the pedestrians around him, everyone's face was filled with happy smiles. He felt a chill down his spine. The chirp in his mind seemed to be getting more and more intense. Nya Xian took advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention and quietly walked onto the subway tracks, walking along the tracks towards the depths of the central city. As he went deeper and deeper, the chirp in his mind became more and more intense. "Close, it's just in front." Nya Xian pressed his aching head. "I want to see what it is." At this moment, Nya Xian walked in front of an iron door. This seemed to be a passage used by the subway maintenance staff. Nya Xian was hesitating on how to open the door when the iron door opened by itself. Following the curved corridor, Nya Xian carefully walked in. After about 100 meters, a huge glass container appeared in front of him. A beautiful blonde girl was soaked in the container with her eyes closed, as if she was sleeping. Nya Xian looked at the girl's beautiful face and was stunned. But in the next moment, a taser gun directly hit his back, causing him to twitch and faint on the ground. The doctor pushed his glasses and muttered, "Mental force field doesn't seem to have any effect on him. It's probably a special ability." The clone in the container opened her eyes. There was an icy expression on her beautiful face. He looked at Nya Xian on the ground and said, "The parameters of the personality adjustment are too high. Maybe we should try to customize the adjustment according to each person's habits. But the range of adjustment shouldn't be too high." The doctor nodded and said, "As long as your computing power can support it, it's fine. But because of the grudges, I don't think we should abruptly remove the hatred coefficient. We should slowly reduce it. Readjust it and proceed to the next stage of the test. Strive to be able to promote the mental network on a large scale within this month." And just as the world of the Eastern continent was rapidly changing, the final battle of the Western continent's unification war had finally begun. Chapter 353. 25 days had passed since the war started in the Western continent. Tyrol's Crevice. It was located in a canyon that was more than 2,000 meters deep. This was the headquarters of Tyrol's national organization, the Annihilation Abyss. However, the crevice was now completely engulfed in flames. Shouts and explosions could be heard everywhere. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Several blades flashed, and the wall in front of him was cut into pieces. Bai Xinghe held the sword of Tatsuka in his right hand and walked in cautiously. However, there was only a man who had been shot in the head sitting in the office of the highest commander of the Annihilation Abyss. Bai Xinghe placed the sword of Tatsuka under the man's chin and lifted his head up. Mephisto. The man's face looked exactly like the commander of the Annihilation Abyss, Tyrol's strongest level 5 ability user, Mephisto. However, judging from the traces at the scene, this man had committed suicide. Suicide with a pistol? A level 5 ability user? Bai Xinghe did not believe this at all. He waved his hand and called in a group of workers outside the wall. Take his body out and dissect it. Run tests and DNA tests. In short, let me know his identity. Yes, sir. A few workers walked in and began to take photos and check the scene. After they were done, they moved the body out. Bai Xinghe also walked out and looked at the cliff of the deep canyon. Balls of fire lit up from time to time. The Xia Dragonfinch's attack on the Annihilation Abyss was too easy. It was so easy that Bai Xinghe felt that something was wrong. It was not just this attack on the Annihilation Abyss. Ever since he led the army to attack Tyrol, he felt that something was wrong. It was not that the opponent resisted, but that it was too easy. Tyrol's performance was just like those small third-rate countries from before. No, it was even weaker. Their military was not even fully equipped, their command was chaotic, and their ability users were few and far between. Until now, Bai Xinghe had not met a single level 5 ability user. Did they all escape? Bai Xinghe frowned and thought. At this moment, a dragon sparrow guard handed a communicator to him. Sir, it's Sir Xia Laikong. Bai Xinghe took it and asked, How's the palace? Tyrol's royal family has all been captured. Xia Laikong paused for a moment before continuing, but I think something is wrong. Yes. Xia Laikong looked at the members of the royal family who were being escorted into the transport plane and frowned. I'm afraid this is a scheme to escape. The people in charge of Tyrol are probably hiding in the shadows. It's not as simple as that. Coldness flashed in Bai Xinghe's eyes. They also took away a lot of equipment and assets. What are they trying to do? If you resist, it would be better to use your own country as your base. If you give up so easily, even if you hide in the dark, you will only be at an infinite disadvantage. Bai Xinghe sneered, unless they are certain that they will fail. Regardless of how the Battle of Tyrol went down, the news of Tyrol's defeat was announced to the world a day later. Although none of the countries in the Western continent had been destroyed, they had all been forced to join Li Onping's Pan-Continent Alliance and accept his management. The world was in an uproar at this moment. A new era was about to begin on Earth. Li Onping sat cross-legged and floated in the valley. Electric currents pierced through the air around him and emitted rays of light at a frequency that was in the visible band of human light. These rays of light were reflected on the ground. One moment, they were circles of light waves, and the next moment, they were dense clusters of light spots. Li Onping had temporarily given up on the realistic explanation of randomness in quantum mechanics. Instead, he directly applied these theories. In this way, although he still could not change the chemical properties of matter by changing the structure of atomic nuclei and electrons, he could achieve the effect of recombination of matter simply by restricting the arrangement of atoms. The electric currents in the air gradually dissipated. Li Onping stretched out his right hand. The next moment, his right hand disintegrated like a cloud of mist. From his skin to his muscles, then to his nerves and bones, everything turned into the most basic atomic state and spread out in the air in a form that was difficult to be seen by the naked eye. Li Onping raised his disappearing right arm. At the next moment, as if something was created out of nothing, the disappearing parts reassembled. First, it was the bones, followed by the nerves, muscles, and other substances. After the recombination of matter is completed, it'll be the transition from electromagnetic forces to strong mutual forces and weak mutual forces. After that, it'll be the spinning field and zero-point vacuum energy. As Li Onping was still unable to solve the theoretical problem of consciousness recombination, he decided to try his best to do what he could to increase his battle prowess during the stage of matter recombination. 1 second later, Li Onping's right arm had completely regenerated. However, a hint of dissatisfaction appeared on his face. The amount of calculation and control required to recombine matter through the arrangement of atoms was far too complicated. Even he was still very unfamiliar with it. Judging from the appearance of the right arm before him, it was exactly the same as his arm in the past. It was as if he had completely succeeded. However, when he wanted to exert force, he realized that his right arm could no longer move at all. The recombination this time around was a complete failure. Therefore, this right arm once again disintegrated and then reassembled. Li Onping could only continuously familiarize himself with this kind of recombination and familiarize himself with the process of recombination. While he was trying out the combination of these arms, Li Onping glanced at Bai Xinghe, Xia Laikong, Jing Guang, Emma, Woody, and Judy, who were all half kneeling on the ground in front of him. Have you finished dealing with the matters in the Western continent? Bai Xinghe withdrew his gaze from Roland's arm and said respectfully, Your Majesty, all the countries in the Western continent have joined the Pan-Continental Alliance and are willing to accept our leadership. However, although we defeated Tyrol this time, something doesn't seem right. Speak. The whole process of attacking them, this time, was too easy. Even though we found a few of their level 5 ability users, as well as the corpses of the emperors and members of the royal family, I feel like they might be clones or substitutes. The real ones might be hiding, wanting to fight against us in the dark. The people on the side looked at Li Onping's right hand that kept disappearing and reappearing. They did not show any special expressions. Only Xia Laikong, who could also control electric currents, had a trace of doubt in his eyes. He felt that there was something special about it. After hearing Bai Xinghe's report, Li Onping said, Tell the public that they have all been executed. You will continue to be in charge of this matter and find them all. What about Violet? Bai Xinghe lowered his head and said, We have confiscated all their bases and companies. As for those, he could not think of a good way to describe Li Onping's clones, so he could only say vaguely, Those clones have all been destroyed. However, we can't find any information about the Federal Grand Canyon in their database. However, Li Onping did not care about his clones. After all, those clones were too weak compared to him. In comparison, he was more concerned about the strangeness in the Federal Grand Canyon. Can't find it? Yes. According to the person in charge, we couldn't find the place where the information was supposed to be stored. It was as if someone had destroyed it. However, we couldn't find any related records. The specific storage device has been sent to Tianjing. Momo is checking it personally. Got it. Li Onping's right hand flashed with blue electric light. His arm appeared like a projection. It had been reconstructed. This time, he clenched his fist and felt a surge of strength. Continue to investigate the Federal Grand Canyon. Also, Tyrol and Violet. See if there is any connection between them. Yes. Bai Xinghe nodded. Xia Laikong reminded him, Your Majesty, there will be a ceremony of the Pan-Continent Alliance in 5 days to celebrate the close union of all the countries of mankind. All the countries will send their highest leaders to attend the ceremony. Wang Chong and the others hope that you can go too. Li Onping nodded and stood up in midair. Tell him that I will go. He knew that since the entire human world had been united, it was time for him to carry out his next plan. It was a good opportunity for him to meet the leaders. Perhaps it was time for him to reveal the existence of the demons and the White Land to them. Chapter 354. In Tianjing, in the temporary campus of Academy City, there were many people coming and going today. It seemed to be very busy, because today was the day of the takeoff of Academy City's headquarters, the Sky Academy. Since 2 weeks ago, all the students and teachers in Academy City had gradually transported all kinds of materials to the Sky Academy. Although Feng Haojie was a graduate of this year, he could still live there for a while before he graduated this year. Thinking of the luxurious facilities in the Sky Academy, his eyes showed a trace of envy and jealousy. Those juniors in the future are so happy. Just as Feng Haojie was thinking about this, the surrounding male and female students started running quickly without him noticing. Just when Feng Haojie was wondering what had happened, his phone rang. Hello, Haojie. A vigorous female voice came from the phone. Where are you? Don't you know? Come to the takeoff ceremony quickly. What's wrong? Feng Haojie frowned and said, What's wrong with the Sky Academy? However, he heard the female voice say excitedly, Your Majesty, Your Majesty is here to attend the takeoff ceremony of the Sky Academy. What? Feng Haojie said in surprise. But hasn't Your Majesty been cultivating behind closed doors recently? He didn't even participate in the unification battle of the Western continent. The girl on the other side shouted, This time, Your Majesty originally came to attend the summit of the Alliance's highest leaders. It was Vice President Liu Sheng who invited him to attend the takeoff ceremony of the Sky Academy. In the end, he really came. In short, hurry over. There won't be a front row seat if you're late. Without waiting for the other side to finish, Feng Haojia had already hung up the phone. However, when he arrived at the scene of the takeoff ceremony, more than 100 seats in the front row had already been taken. The remaining students could only stand in the back row and squeeze together. Sorry, take this. Feng Haojia had no choice but to use his psychic energy and slowly squeeze up for the back row. The students of Academy City were naturally ability users. When they saw someone trying to squeeze in with psychic energy, they were naturally unwilling. However, just as they were about to fight back, when they turned their heads and saw Feng Haojia, their faces suddenly changed. When they were hesitating whether to move aside, Feng Haojia had already walked to the front. Feng Haojia was one of the most outstanding graduates in this year's batch. His prestige in the school was obviously not ordinary. After all, unlike normal schools, the students in Academy City had to be strong if they wanted to get good grades. Just as Feng Haojia was squeezing and smiling at the people who were pushed aside, a girl in the front row stood up and waved at him. Haojia, over here. After a series of squeezes and greetings, Feng Haojia finally sat down. Phew, I finally squeezed in. The short-haired girl giggled and said, "We're brothers, aren't we? I didn't even save a spot for Raphael." "Thank you, Vivian," Feng Haojia said excitedly. "I didn't expect His Majesty to come here personally. He didn't even come to the opening ceremony last time." Vivian patted Feng Haojia on the shoulder and said, "Well, I know you are an NC fan. Don't be so excited." At this moment, the two people's vision suddenly darkened. The whole world suddenly turned dark, and they couldn't even see their own fingers. No, it wasn't that they couldn't see their own fingers. It was that they had completely lost their light source. It was to the point where they couldn't see anything with the naked eye. The scene instantly became chaotic. Feng Haojia and Vivian stood back to back. Without saying a word, their psychic energy mixed together and spread out in all directions. In the next second, Feng Haojia's body shook, and he quickly turned his head to look at the stage. Even though his vision was still dark, there was still a trace of surprise in his eyes. Other than them, the people present had different reactions. Some were panicking, some wanted to run away, some immediately used their abilities to hide, and some released light to freeze the scene. However, in the next moment, the light returned to everyone's eyes, and in this short period of darkness, two men appeared on the stage, Li Anping and Liu Sheng. When they saw Li Anping appear on the stage, there was a burst of exclamations from the crowd. However, before they could continue, Li Anping opened his mouth. His calm voice was intentionally amplified by the vibrations in the air, and it covered everyone's voices. "Just now is a greeting from me to you." Li Anping glanced at all the students present and said, "I let Liu Sheng temporarily take away your vision. I want to see how you will react." After Li Anping said this, the scene quieted down. A few students who had directly rushed out of the arena, and a few who had directly drilled into the ground or hid themselves, all returned to the arena with awkward expressions. Li Anping's gaze didn't look at them, but slightly paused on Feng Haojia and the other four students present. It's a pity that in the 2-second surprise attack, only 5 of the 300 students present discovered Liu Sheng and me. To be honest, I'm a bit disappointed. When Li Anping finished this sentence, most of the students present showed a look of shame. Some people did not take it seriously, and some people had a look of indignation in their eyes, thinking that they were just not prepared. You are all ability users, students of Academy City, which means that you are the best in the whole of the Xia, or even the whole of the Eastern Continent. Most of you will join the Xia Dragonfinch after graduation. In other people's eyes, your life experience is like a golden path. Li Anping paused, then continued. Now that the Earth has been unified and the war is over, all you need to do is study hard and work hard in Academy City. I'm afraid most of you think the same, but I want to tell you that you're wrong. The war is far from over. Li Anping looked at everyone present and said, Academy City is the cradle of the elite. Every student here has the best talent in the human race, and you have only one responsibility in the future, which is to protect the human race. As the most elite ability users of the human race, what awaits you in the future is the most dangerous position. Your enemies may have all kinds of incredible abilities, and visual deprivation like today is just one of the most common. Maybe in the reunion 10 years later, only 1/10 of you will be able to make it. The only thing you can rely on is wisdom and hard work. I hope you can always be vigilant and never lose your pursuit of power. After saying this, Li Onping nodded at Lu Sheng, leaving the scene to him. Li Onping, surrounded by a few dragon sparrow guards, walked to the car. In the next few days, he would participate in the summit of the Pan-Continent Alliance's highest leaders, setting the tone for the development of the human race on Earth. The students at the scene spontaneously applauded and watched Li Onping leave. Many students took out their mobile phones and began to take photos of Li Onping's position. Today, Li Onping's speech in the Sky Academy was also posted on major websites and media, causing widespread discussion. Some people disagreed, and some people felt that Li Onping did a good job. However, only a small number of people noticed the war that Li Onping mentioned and associated it with the monsters that caused chaos in the Western continent before. They had a bad feeling in their hearts. On the night of the Sky Academy's takeoff, in the mountains south of Xia, a mountain village boy was sitting at home, looking at the newspaper in his hand. The content of the newspaper was about today's Academy City and the summit meeting of the Alliance. The boy's father walked in with a shoulder pull. Looking at the boy's serious look, he said casually, "Shining, are you reading the newspaper? Something big happened recently?" The boy named Su Shining raised his head and said excitedly, "The Sky Academy took off, and the Emperor went to give a speech." The Sky Academy? Is that the school that can fly in the sky? The father thought about it, and his face was full of surprise. It can fly just like that? It was only built a year ago, right? That's not it. Su Shining said proudly. I heard that the Emperor personally took action and greatly reduced the time. Just as the father and son were talking about national affairs, Su Shining's mother came out of the kitchen, holding a bowl and chopsticks, and said, Okay, go and help me bring the dishes. If there's anything, let's eat first." Two little boys and girls, who were only 8 or 9 years old, followed behind their mother and brought out the meal from the kitchen. Su Shining and his father also stepped forward to help set up the table. There were a total of 3 dishes, 1 soup, and a big pot of rice. The family's dinner began. While eating, the 3 children talked about what happened at school today, and the parents talked about the village. This was the only time the family could communicate every day. Su Shining's sister said, Dandin said that his brother went to Jadeite City to take an exam last week and was accepted by the school with special abilities. Today, he even came to school to give us candy to eat. When he heard his sister's words, Su Shining's face darkened. His father, who was standing to the side, picked up a large amount of food with his chopsticks and gave it to his sister. Eating so much can't stop your mouth. His sister sneaked a glance at Su Shining's face and then reacted. She didn't say anything else and just kept eating. His brother, Su Shining, had always been the top student in school. 2 months ago, he also went to Jadeite City to take the exam for the school with special abilities. However, he was told that he didn't have any abilities and wasn't accepted. The school with special abilities in Jadeite City was opened by the 9 royal families and was one of the only 10 schools in Xia. Their test results were basically a death sentence for Su Shining on the path of having special abilities. Looking at her son's ugly face, his mother comforted him. It's okay. If you don't have special abilities, then so be it. Wait until you graduate from high school and go to university. Look at Ao Wei from the neighboring village. Isn't he doing well? I heard that his monthly salary is over 10,000 yuan. Seeing his parents comforting him together and thinking about what he saw in the newspaper today, Su Shining raised his head and looked at his father with determination. Dad, I want to go to Tianjing. Instantly, the whole table quieted down. His father put down his bowl and chopsticks and said with a frown, Why do you want to go to Tianjing? I saw the newspaper today. The newspaper said that Academy City opened a specialization to teach ancient abilities. The registration requirement is that you have to pass the aptitude test. You don't have to be an ability user. While speaking, Su Xining lowered his head. I want to try again. Hearing his son's words, his mother was the first to object. Dewa, we're all normal people. As long as you live a peaceful life, I'll be at ease. It's okay if you don't have special abilities. Su Xining raised his head and said excitedly, I want to try again. I think it might work. Why are you so disobedient? His mother wanted to persuade him again, but his father coughed and said, Okay, Xining, after failing the test in Jadeite City, I knew that you wouldn't give up. If you want to go, you can. He waved his hand to stop his mother, who still wanted to say something. He looked at Su Xining and said, But if you still fail this time, then don't waste time trying again. Come back and study hard. Okay. Su Xining nodded heavily, but his two fists under the table were clenched until they turned white. Chapter 355. Letting the issue regarding Sakot here. In the conference room, Wang Chong looked at the more than 300 representatives from all over the world, representing more than 150 countries, and said, As for the division of borders, we'll follow the results of the discussion just now. He raised his head and looked at Li Onping's seat. When he saw the other party nod, he continued, The next issue is regarding the distribution of the world's aptitude users. Although the entire world was now under Li Onping's rule, there were still many issues and conflict between countries and regions that needed to be resolved one by one. However, because of Li Onping's absolute suppression, such issues were all resolved by the government of Xia. As time passed, the alliance would gradually reduce the influence of the governments of various countries, making them a part of the alliance, and become Li Onping's tentacles in every corner of the world. The issue regarding aptitude users was even more so. As an important fighting force in the human world from now on, all aptitude users in the world had to register their information with the Alliance and accept work assignment from the Alliance under the premise of seeking their own consent. As for the strategy of aptitude user schools, they would first learn from Xia's current method. Every country could set up 1 or 2 aptitude user schools to be responsible for training aptitude users. As for Xia's 10 aptitude user schools, they would also expand their enrollment to the entire world. As for the graduates of the various schools, apart from the government, the military, and the police, aptitude users with strong combat abilities would have 2 choices: the Xia Dragonfinch in the Eastern Continent and the Imaginary Organization in the Western Continent. They would be by Xinghe and Judy Arnold, respectively. As for Liu Sheng, who was originally in charge of the Xia Dragonfinch, under Li Onping's inquiry, he would become the general director of the Xia's 10 aptitude user schools. Due to Li Onping's full support, these 10 aptitude user schools would probably become the top aptitude user schools in the entire human world, and Academy City would be the top of the top. Apart from this, Li Onping also decided to establish a special ability user unit to cooperate with the military. This unit would be called the Human Armed Forces and would be led by Xia Laikong. Compared to the Imaginary Number Service and the Xia Dragonfinch, they were more inclined to cooperate with the army to prepare for the battle between humans and demons in the future. Of course, there were still many issues that the entire human race needed to be unified. Economy, law, race. There were too many things that needed to be considered. Li Onping naturally did not intend to waste all his time on this. He only came up with a general strategy, which required that the original situation of those countries be respected as much as possible under the circumstances of unification. As for the remaining matters, they were naturally left to the civil officials. The meeting went on until 9 o'clock in the evening. A man suddenly walked up to Wang Chong and whispered something in his ear. His expression changed as he looked at the already tired people below the stage and said, Everyone, regarding the remaining topics, we will continue to discuss them tomorrow. Next, His Majesty will give us a few words. Wang Chong's words immediately woke everyone up from their tiredness. Amidst the applause, Li Onping slowly walked onto the stage. Everyone stared at the strongest human on the stage, the unprecedented emperor. They were thinking about what the other party would say. Would it be related to what Li Onping said in Academy City this morning? Everyone, what I'm about to say next might be related to the survival of humanity. Li Onping clapped his hands. The next moment, a holographic image appeared behind him. It was the image and information of Li Onping's battle with Gray in New Danyang, as well as the video of Li Onping's battle with Higram in the Western continent. Although most of the people present had heard about these two battles, it was the first time they had seen such comprehensive information. As you can see, in the past 2 years, I've fought against these non-human creatures twice. These creatures call themselves demons. They were born in a universe called the White Land. They can travel to other universes through something called the World Crossing Gate. The video of Higram destroying an entire city with a wave of his hand appeared before everyone's eyes. And now, they've discovered Earth. I've captured this demon called Higram. From what he said, I can confirm that the next wave of attacks from the demons will happen in 12 to 18 months. This is the information I received last month. In other words, in 17 months at most, we will have to face these demons. Li Onping's words obviously shocked everyone present, but he had already planned to tell the majority of the information about the demons to unite the power of humanity. With his absolute military might, the entire human world had been unified. Now that the demons were in danger, not only would he be able to divert the internal conflicts of a unified human world away, he would also be able to effectively unite them, allowing humans to erupt with even greater power in this crisis. This demon, named Higram, has the ability of the 7th rank. Li Onping pointed at the picture of Higram behind him and said, "Yes, you didn't hear wrong. The demon's abilities are divided into 10 levels. This Higram with 7th level ability, if I'm not included, is enough to wipe out the entire human world. In the White Land, there are many demons stronger than him. The strongest 12 of them are called the 12 demon gods. All of them have reached the 9th level. Fortunately, there are only 7 of them left." A black representative stood up and looked at Li Onping's gaze. Although he was a bit scared and nervous, he still said, "Your Majesty, I'm not doubting you, but how do we know that this so-called demon, Higram, is telling the truth?" "You're right." Under Li Onping's control, the holographic projection behind him quickly changed, and a lot of information about Gray was displayed. Above everyone's head was a 3D projection of Gray. Above Gray was the scene of the entire New Danyang. The name of this behemoth is Ash, also known as the world-destroying behemoth. It's one of the 12 demon gods that have been exiled. However, the one in New Danyang is only a small part of its body. However, this small part has already formed a human country, Danyang. Following Li Onping's manipulation, Gray's holographic image was zoomed in at high speed. It was as if people had descended from the sky and landed on Gray's skin, followed by his various organs and the various monsters that resided within his skin and organs. This is a 3D model of Gray's body made by the Royal Academy of Sciences. As you can see, his body is not only enormous, but it also contains enough energy to destroy the entire Earth. If any of the parasites in his body were to wander uncontrollably into human society, it would cause a huge disaster. They are now in New Danyang. If you need evidence, you can go and take a look at them at any time. Do you think there should be such creatures on Earth? The people in the audience looked at the holographic image in front of them and the various written reports about Gray. Their faces were full of disbelief. Whether it was the demons, Gray, or Higram, their real existence was completely beyond the common sense of these people. Although they still had some doubts, looking at the information in front of them, most of them already believed it. This was also related to Li Onping's current absolute power and absolute power. How can this be? Unbelievable. Such creatures actually exist. How strong are those demons? How should we deal with them? What's the so-called 9th energy level? Can we humans reach it? If Li Onping didn't unify the human world and instead called all the leaders of the countries here, whether or not he would be able to do so was not a question. Even if all of them were here, whether or not they would believe him was a problem. If they believed him, how they would lead and who would listen to whom would be an even bigger problem. They definitely wouldn't be as relaxed as Li Onping was now. Everyone, the crisis of humanity is imminent. I need all of you to mobilize all of your forces. Liamping's gaze was as heavy as 1,000 pounds. With a glance, no one dared to look him in the eye. It also completely suppressed the noise in the audience. At most, in 17 months, the worst-case scenario might be an 8th energy-level demon appearing on Earth. So from now on, although the ordinary people don't know, we will be completely in a state of war. Everything is for humanity. Liamping's words obviously set off a huge wave in the hearts of the people. The contents of the summit meeting would probably be completely changed. This was also a time that Liamping had specially chosen. The topics discussed before the announcement of the demons were all important and related to the most basic problems of every country. Liamping looked at the topics after that. They weren't particularly urgent and could completely make way for the war. Therefore, Liamping chose to let them discuss first and directly prepare to deal with the demons after the discussion. When the people below the stage saw Liamping finish speaking, they clearly had a lot of questions they wanted to ask. Judy Arnold was the first to stand up, asking the question that all level 5 ability users wanted to know. Your Majesty, I want to ask, the so-called 8th energy level and 9th energy level, what kind of power do they possess? As such, Liamping told them what Hygram told him, and then added, Hygram doesn't know much about the 9th energy level. As for the 8th energy level, according to different abilities, destructive power, speed, and other aspects, there will be different. However, from what I understand, regarding their undying nature, I fear that with humanity's current technological methods, it is impossible to kill them. As for the specific information, I will send you all later. Claudia, who represented Ice Fortress in the summit, stood up. Right now, she was wearing a black suit, her pink long hair tied up. Compared to before, she had a more capable aura. Your Majesty, can the world-crossing gate not be destroyed? Liamping shook his head. No, the world-crossing gate is a unique product of the White Land. It is like a gravitational force. There is no option to destroy it. Unless one day I can modify the universe's parameters, there is no way to shut it down. Your Majesty. A white man stood up. Is there no possibility of peaceful coexistence? A race like the demons should be able to communicate, right? Liamping gave him a look, and then said word by word, there is absolutely no such possibility. The White Land has many world-crossing gates. They can reach other places, not only our Earth. They have also encountered humans in other worlds. And for the demons, humans are existences similar to food. Moreover, for many demons, humans have the effect of increasing their power, just like the freaks that appeared in the Codex Nation and the Federation. Therefore, I will reiterate once again, there is absolutely no possibility of compromise between humans and demons. The option of surrender does not exist. Liamping coldly swept his eyes over the people below the stage, and then he began to answer another person's question. Time quietly passed by during this exchange of questions and answers. Meanwhile, as the representatives received information regarding the demons written by Liamping one after another, as well as questions answered by Liamping one after another, everyone felt the severity of the situation. However, the demons weren't right in front of them, so even though most of them felt danger, they didn't feel as if it was imminent, as if fire was burning in their eyebrows. Meanwhile, Liamping also requested that the relevant information could only be known by those present, all level 5 ability users, and the highest leaders of all countries. Information regarding the demons wasn't open to everyone for the time being. From this night onwards, whether they knew it or not, the entire human society was like a fully wound engine, starting to exert all of its horsepower in order to resist the unprecedented crisis. Chapter 356. Half a month after the Supreme Summit, on the frozen ocean in the northern part of the Lost State, the originally sunny weather suddenly changed. Dark clouds shrouded the sky, as if they would fall at any time. There was a unique sense of dread in the air, the feeling of an impending storm. A small fishing boat was drifting in the dark sea. The crew on the boat looked nervously at the increasingly dark sea outside the window, as well as the increasingly large waves. Damn, why is there a storm all of a sudden? It was fine just now. We can't go on like this. We can't escape. We can only resist. Just as the crew expressed their worries in twos and threes, a huge wave hit the boat, shaking the whole boat. The water droplets falling from the sky hit the deck of the small fishing boat like a waterfall, making crackling sounds. The storm had begun. Go back to the cabin. As soon as the captain shouted this sentence, the violent rainwater poured into his mouth. In the fury of the sea, the small fishing boat had no power to fight back. The crew could only hide in the cabin, quietly waiting for nature's judgment on them. In the cabin, some crew members prayed. "Lord, please forgive us." Some crew members began to complain about the captain. "I told you not to come. If the captain didn't insist on a long voyage, we wouldn't have encountered such a thing." More people were pale, sitting nervously in the cabin that was constantly being hit by the storm and shaking crazily, silently. At this moment, another huge wave hit the ship. With a loud bang, the ship let out a low and hoarse sound, as if it would break at any moment. In the end, the ship did not flip over and landed steadily on the surface of the sea. Just as all the crew members heaved a sigh of relief, another wave crashed into the ship. The huge force directly overturned the fishing ship without mercy. The entire ship crashed into the bottom of the sea upside down and kept sinking to the bottom. Help! I don't want to die. The seawater poured into the cabin, washing the crew together like sardines. Just as they began to struggle in panic and despair, thinking that they were going to die, a soft bang came from the bottom of the boat. Then, the small fishing boat that had sunk into the sea slowly floated to the surface under the force of a push. The crew rushed to the deck as if they had been reborn, taking in large mouthfuls of fresh air. Then, he looked at the surrounding sky, not knowing what to do. The fishing boat was flying higher and higher, rising into the sky. "Oh my God, we're flying." At the bottom of the fishing boat, the black psychic energy avatar lifted the entire fishing boat with both hands and continued to rise into the sky. The fishing boat broke through the dark clouds, reaching a height of tens of thousands of meters, and a huge floating fortress appeared in front of everyone. It was a war fortress built by the Federation, Sky City. Ignoring the cries of surprise on the fishing boat, Li Onping moved the small fishing boat into the helipad under Sky City. Soon after, it flew out again and plunged into the sea tens of thousands of meters below the surface of the sea. Ever since the summit meeting half a month ago, the entire human society had been pushed forward by Li Onping. Warp gates were installed in every city, and controllable nuclear fusion reactors sent sufficient energy to the entire Western continent. After unifying the world, the Royal Academy of Sciences, as a research institute directly under Li Onping, also received more resources. The best scientists of every country were summoned to the new Eastern Sun, where they would continue to digest the technology from the Divine King and even use it as a foundation to develop more weapons of war. And now, Sky City had come to the frozen ocean in the northern part of the Codex State in order to build a submarine base around the portal in the depths of the sea. This was because once the demons arrived, this place would be the first line of defense against them, and also a stronghold to monitor the situation of the portal. In the midst of a violent storm, the psychic energy avatar had already dug into the sea with a bang, bringing up a spray of water with it. Compared to the violent surface of the sea, the bottom of the sea looked much calmer. In the blink of an eye, Li Onping had already dived more than 100 meters. The storm on the surface of the sea had no effect on this place at all, and colorful sea fishes swam freely in front of him. The psychic energy avatar suddenly began to dive again. As Li Onping continued to dive deeper, the sunlight could no longer shine on the surface of the sea at this depth, and the surroundings began to gradually become dim. As he continued to dive deeper, the surrounding creatures gradually disappeared. As he dived deeper, the water pressure became higher and higher, and it was no longer a place where ordinary creatures could survive. When Li Onping reached the bottom of the sea 10,000 meters, there were no longer any fish creatures around him. In this pitch-black sea, there was nothing at all. The human eye could not sense any light source, nor could it see anything. There was only a terrifying silence that filled the boundless darkness. Loneliness, darkness, and despair. This was the feeling that the depths of the sea gave people. If it was someone else other than Li Onping who appeared here, even if he had the strength of a psychic energy avatar, he would probably be tortured to madness by the darkness and loneliness in front of him. In this silent silence, a pitch-black shadow rushed towards Li Onping. The shadow was like a deep-sea giant. Its huge body was more than 300 meters long, and it collided with Li Onping, who was still at the bottom of the sea. With a loud bang, the shadow had already collided with Li Onping. Then, like a snake, it coiled towards Li Onping. If there was a searchlight at this time, it would be able to see that the shadow in front of him was a huge snake covered in white scales. Its body was almost as thick as an ordinary building. As for the specific size, just think of a building that was more than 100 stories tall. When Li Onping saw a sea monster this size, he was naturally not afraid at all. He only patted the sea monster's body and said, "All right, stop fooling around." The sea monster seemed to understand Li Onping's meaning. It swung its tail and continued to dive into the depths of the sea with Li Onping. This sea monster was actually a monster from New Danyang. This time, for the construction of the underwater base in the frozen ocean, Li Onping also brought it here. This giant monster that was enough to dominate the entire underwater world became as obedient as a puppy in front of Li Onping. In the blink of an eye, the man and the monster had dived more than 2,000 meters again. The originally dark underwater world suddenly lit up with starry lights. The bottom of the sea, which should have been empty and filled with darkness and dead silence, was now filled with all kinds of construction machinery. There were also dozens of huge searchlights, which illuminated the entire bottom of the sea as if it was daytime. The giant snake sea monster had swam away again and went to patrol the nearby deep sea. Li Onping looked at the construction site in front of him. The yellow construction robots were busy like bees. These construction robots were the latest underwater scouts developed by the Royal Academy of Sciences. Their bodies were made of newly developed steel alloys and theoretically could work at a depth of 50,000 meters. The first experiment had been successful at a depth of 20,000 meters. These construction robots were equipped with particle weapons and could move at a speed of 30 knots underwater. They could be remotely controlled by human beings. Right now, they were responsible for the construction of the underwater base. At the center of the large construction site, the blue portal floated quietly at the bottom of the sea. Sky City in the air was responsible for supporting the construction team on the surface of the sea. As for Li Onping's psychic avatar, it was responsible for staying around the portal. First, it was to help the construction of the underwater base. Second, it was the most suitable person on Earth to guard this place. After all, ordinary aptitude users would be useless against the Demon Clan if they stayed here. Among the stronger rank 5 aptitude users, there didn't seem to be anyone suitable for underwater combat. Also, Li Onping discovered that his psychic avatar had a pretty good advantage in underwater combat. The abundant hydrogen and oxygen atoms here could greatly increase his combat strength. If the battle went out of control, he could return to Li Onping's side and shake off the enemy. Chapter 357. Tianjing, the Warp Center. Su Xining walked out of the Warp Center that marked Jadeite City. He was carrying a bulging backpack on his back. It was filled with food that his mother had prepared for him. Su Xining suddenly looked up as if he sensed something. He saw the back of a long-haired girl flash past him. However, when he looked carefully again, the girl had already blended into the crowd and disappeared. Although Su Xining felt a little strange, he didn't pay much attention to it. He turned his head and looked at the bustling crowd in front of him. He swallowed his saliva. This was the first time he had seen so many people. There were all kinds of people, all kinds of skin colors, all kinds of races, all kinds of clothes, and all kinds of ages. There's so many people in Tianjin. He patted his face. Don't embarrass yourself. Then, under the guidance of the surrounding signs, he walked down to the underground floor. There was a subway that connected to every corner of Tianjin. Due to the vigorous promotion of the warp gate, its cheap and efficient characteristics quickly conquered everyone. Under the pressure of the warp gate, all the planes, trains, and shipping in the western and eastern continents were basically closed. Only some trains, planes, and ships were left for sightseeing and tourism. The large number of people brought by this caused the warp center in Tianjin to gradually become overwhelmed. However, the other 3 warp centers were already in the process of being built. One was located at the other end of Tianjin. The Federation of the Western Continent would also build another 2. The entire human world would be infinitely shrunk. Therefore, what appeared in front of Su Xining now was an unprecedented sea of people. Sorry. Excuse me. Su Xining carried the huge backpack and could only slowly squeeze his way to the platform amidst the continuous apologies and complaints of the crowd. When he finally reached the back of the line, he couldn't help but sigh. There are so many people. At this moment, a cry of surprise came from the front of the subway platform. Su Xining looked up curiously and saw an old man with a head full of white hair rushing into the subway tracks. He was shouting something, but because there was too much noise around, she couldn't hear him at all. However, when Su Xining saw this scene, her entire body involuntarily rushed over. The huge bag kept colliding with the crowd, causing a series of curses. But Su Xining couldn't care less. The horn of the subway had already reached the platform. When he jumped onto the track and grabbed the old man's shoulder, the light from the front of the train had already shone on the platform. Let's go. Su Xining wanted to save the old man, but the old man struggled and shouted, Don't worry about me. Just let me die. Let me die. I want the whole world to know that my son's death cannot be in vain. After all, Su Xining was young and strong. After some dragging, she managed to drag the old man to the platform. However, the old man's struggle became more and more intense. He even opened his mouth to bite Su Xining's arm. However, before she could bite Su Xining, a huge palm had already landed on the old man's neck, knocking him out. It turned out that a white man more than 2 meters tall had also jumped off the platform. After knocking the old man out, he immediately carried him up the platform with Su Xining. Just after they jumped off the platform, the train that had already entered the station slowly stopped about 10 meters away from them. In an instant, the whole platform was filled with applause. Well done. Beautiful. Su Xining wiped off the sweat on her forehead and exhaled a sigh of relief. Although he didn't hesitate at all when he saved the old man, now that he thought about it, he felt very scared. Are you okay? The white man who saved the old man with Su Xining patted him on the shoulder and said in Xia language, You're very good. My name is Jason. My name is Su Xining. Su Xining didn't expect this white guy in front of him to speak fluent Xia language. Only then did he have the time to size up the other party. The white man in front of him, Jason, was not only tall, but also very muscular. Although he was wearing clothes, his thick chest was like a city wall, giving people a strong sense of oppression. Just as the two of them were introducing themselves, a man in uniform walked up to them and said, Excuse me, I'm a staff member of the subway. Can I trouble you to follow me to the office? Seeing the two of them looking at him, he immediately explained, Don't worry, I just want to take your contact information and ask about your situation at that time. 10 minutes later, in the subway office, Su Xining nodded and said, That's the basic situation. I don't know that old man. He looked at the staff member in front of him who was taking notes. In the end, he couldn't help but ask, How is that old man now? Why did he want to commit suicide? The staff member looked at the two of them hesitantly and sighed. Forget it. I won't tell you anyway. You'll see it in the newspaper the next day. You know about the Western continent's war of unification, right? Seeing the two of them nod, he continued. Although the military has tried their best to end the war as quickly as possible, there are still many people who died. That old man just now, his son seems to be a soldier of a country in the Western continent. This was also one of the series of reactions brought about by the warp gate. The flow of information, humans, and resources greatly increased, which also brought about a series of societal effects that needed to be resolved by the government. Seeing the heavy atmosphere, the staff member looked at the backpacks on their backs and suddenly said, "You two aren't here to take the entrance exam of Academy City, are you?" Su Xining's face reddened, then lowered his head in embarrassment and said, "Yes, although I don't have any abilities, I heard that Academy City has opened an ancient class for the powerless, so I wanted to give it a try." The white man named Jason also nodded. "I don't know if I have the ability or not. I originally planned to take part in the martial arts tournament in 2 months, but I heard that Academy City is also recruiting the powerless, so I wanted to give it a try." Hearing their answer, the staff member smiled. It was obvious that their actions of risking their lives to save someone had won him a good impression. He smiled and said, "Academy City is a very difficult place to enter. Even though there's an entrance test every month, I heard that the passing rate of their entrance test is less than 1%, which means that only 1 out of 100 people will be able to enter. And that's the passing rate for ability users. If they're recruiting people without ability users this time, I'm afraid the passing rate will be even lower." Hearing his words and facing such a harsh passing rate, both Jason and Su Xining showed a worried expression. The staff member continued, "But if you don't pass, you don't have to take it to heart. After all, if you want to pass that kind of exam, you have to have 1 in a million aptitude and a little bit of luck. If you don't get in, Tianjin has a biotech college, which is also a superpower college. You can give it a try. Other than that, if you're sure that you don't have the ability, you can use the warp portal to go to Chiqing City in Baiwei. There are many secret martial arts sects there. Right now, there are many young people who have been tested to be powerless. They have all gone there to cultivate their ancient abilities." Hearing this, Su Xining's expression didn't change, but Jason's eyes lit up. He came to Xia to pursue greater power. If he couldn't get into Academy City, Baiwei was indeed a good place to go. Moreover, he used to fight in the underground boxing ring in the Federation and practice fighting techniques for many years. He believed that if he cultivated his ancient abilities, he would have some advantages. A few minutes later, the two of them walked out of the subway office together. Jason looked at Su Xining and said, "Since you're also taking the exam, let's go together. But if you think about it, we are also competitors." Su Xining scratched her head and smiled. "I'm just an ordinary high school student. Brother Jason, you're obviously much stronger than me. Your success rate is also much higher than mine." "That's not necessarily true." Jason shook his head. The two of them went together and rushed to the Tianjin branch of Academy City. After all, the Sky Academy had taken off. If ordinary people wanted to find Academy City, they could only go to their office in Tianjin. Chapter 358. After leaving the subway office, Jason and Su Xining first went to Academy City's Tianjin office to sign up for the entrance test. But the actual test will only start in 3 days. As for what the test will be, they'll find out when the time comes. The two looked at the long line at the registration office, looked at each other, and smiled bitterly. They didn't have much confidence in their success. So after signing up, they went to find a hotel together. When they walked to the door of a hotel, Su Xining seemed to feel something and suddenly turn her head. She saw a long-haired woman turn the corner, leaving her with a beautiful back view, and then disappeared. Jason patted Su Xining's shoulder and asked, "What are you looking at?" "That over there." Su Xining thought for a bit, but still shook her head. "Nothing, let's go in." The two went to the front desk and asked, "Boss, let's get 2 rooms. No more. There's only 1 room with a big bed. I think you two should just squeeze in." A middle-aged man at the front desk looked up at the two, yawned and said, "You're also here to take the entrance test, right? This is the first time Academy City is recruiting people with no abilities. There are at least 300,000 to 400,000 candidates in Tianjin, and there will be even more in the next 3 days. The surrounding hotels are already full." Just as he was speaking, another young man carrying a large box walked in from outside the door. After seeing this, Jason took the money and slapped it in front of the boss. "We'll take the room, 10 days. Su Xining still wanted to persuade him, but she felt that the booking time was too long. But Jason had been fighting underground for a few years, so he was quite rich and didn't care about the accommodation fee. The boss took the money with a smile and then enthusiastically handed over a small booklet. This is the shop's exclusive sale. It's information about Academy City's entrance test. Would you two like to buy one? Su Xining's eyes lit up and grabbed it. She saw the words written on it. The 100 questions of Academy City's interview. Ancient abilities. Let us rely on hard work to defeat geniuses. Basic superpower knowledge organized by amazing people. No need to fear the entrance test anymore. Superpowers come from nothing, allowing you to become an ability user in 5 days. Jason took a quick glance at the book and realized that the title on the cover was shocking enough. It was obviously a made-up booklet used to cheat money. However, when he saw Su Xining's eyes glowing, he shook his head and sighed. He did not stop her from buying it. As soon as they entered the room, the two of them tidied up a little. Su Xining's eyes lit up as she flipped through the booklet, while Jason lay on the bed and turned on the TV to watch. Whether it was Su Xining or Jason, the two of them had grown up in hardship. They did not mind being in the same room and squeezed on the same bed. Jason turned on the television, which was broadcasting the news. Today, the construction of Tianjin's West Warp Center has officially broken ground. In order to accommodate more and more tourists from all over the world, the West Warp Center will be bigger than the old one, which is the current East Warp Center. It is estimated that after completion, it will have more than 4,000 warp halls and can accommodate 300 to 400 million passengers per day. It is worth noting that the construction of the West Warp Center this time will use the RAS's newest Dragonoid engineering robots. They will work together with ability users to build the center. Today, the first Prophet satellite was successfully launched at Ural City in the southern part of the Federation. The Prophet satellite uses the Federation's newest technology to monitor all kinds of natural disasters and criminal activities. It is also connected to the world's police network, effectively preventing criminal activities everywhere. According to FAA spokesperson Jim Parsons, the Pan-Continent Alliance will launch more than 30 Prophet satellites around the world in the next 3 months, covering the entire world with a disaster and crime monitoring network. Jason took a few glances at the news, but nothing interested him. He turned around and saw a movie being broadcasted. The movie was called The Resistance, and it was about an alien invasion. A Xia boy's parents were killed by aliens, and he awakened an ability. He joined the army, grew stronger and stronger, and finally defeated the aliens with the help of his companions. Speaking of which, ever since Li Anping appeared out of nowhere, all the movies about ability users have been selling very well. It was said that a couple of the Xia Dragonfinch players were invited to make cameo appearances in this movie last year, and the box office sales were very good. Compared to the boring news, the blockbuster movie in front of Jason was much more interesting. Damn it, how did it end already? Jason, who was watching the movie with relish, suddenly cursed. It turned out that the movie ended when the young man repelled the aliens and was about to lead the Earth Army to counterattack the aliens' home planet. He turned around and saw that Su Xining was still tirelessly reading the booklet in her hand. He asked with a smile, "How was it? Did you learn anything?" Su Xining raised her head and stared at Jason with reddened eyes, giving him a fright. I see, she said to Jason excitedly. Brother Jason, did you know? The current leader of the Xia Dragonfinch, by Xinghe, was the emperor of the Shang dynasty over 2,000 years ago. Back then, he sealed himself in ice for the sake of immortality. He was not an ability user when he was young, but the reason why he became so strong was that he found a secret manual under the cattail hassock when he was cleaning the ancestral hall of his family. Then, he practiced a secret martial art called the Supreme Monarch Technique. Look, as she spoke, she took out the booklet. Jason glanced at it, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. It was filled with messy figures, and then there were 5 big red words, Supreme Monarch Technique. She stood up and patted Jason on the shoulder. However, when she saw the eagerness on Jason's face, she sighed and said, "You can just take a look at this after that." She shook her head and walked out of the door. I'm gonna get some dinner. Do you want me to bring anything? Su Xining lowered her head and stared at the booklet in her hand. She said without turning her head, "No need. I have food in my bag." 8 p.m., Tianjin University, 13th floor of the Imperial Library. Li Onping floated in the air. Around him, dozens of books were all facing him. They spun around him like rings. The dozens of books were flipped by the field of nothingness, one after another. It was as if they were turning the pages for Li Onping to see. Most of these books were very thick. The contents on the covers were all related to quantum mechanics, such as the foundation of quantum mechanics, the new quantum world, the ghost in the atom, the history of elementary particle physics, and so on. For the past few days, Li Onping had been staying in Tianjin. As for New Danyang, he had already completed the electromagnetic drive. There was no need to recharge it through the nuclear reactor anymore, so he left it to the Royal Academy of Sciences. During this time, Li Onping had basically completed the reconstruction of all matter except for his brain. He was optimizing and supplementing some of the contents, such as the strong interaction force, the weak interaction force, and the problem of consciousness that Li Onping had no clue about. He reached out with both hands and grabbed a handful of air molecules. The so-called electromagnetic force is the repulsion of like and attraction of opposite. According to quantum electrodynamics, its essence is the result of two particles exchanging photons nonstop. All interactions between particles in the world, from the collision of electrons to the labor of the human body, are just the result of this electromagnetic force. But when it comes to the inside of an atomic nucleus, it's a matter of the strong interaction force and the weak interaction force. The former attracts the protons and neutrons in the nucleus, while the latter causes so-called decay. Add in the gravitational force, and these four forces are the only forces in the entire universe. Thinking up to this point, Li Onping's hands began to move. The air molecules in his hands began to change into various colors. According to current theories, the electromagnetic force is the exchange of photons, the strong interaction force is the exchange of mesons, and the weak interaction force is the exchange of interatomic bosons. Their essence is the same. They're the same type of force. So, after a series of blue electric sparks, the colorful air in Li Onping's hands started to form a lump of meat. Then this thumb-sized lump of meat kept on changing and growing. He was changing the chemical properties of atoms, changing the essence of matter on the basis of the reconstruction of matter. A few seconds later, like a piece of a jigsaw puzzle, the lump of meat had additional eyes, a nose, and a tail. A snow-white little mouse appeared before him. This mouse had a heartbeat and blood was flowing. It looked no different from a real mouse. However, Li Onping looked at the motionless mouse in his hands and revealed a disappointed expression. No consciousness? Why? How is this different from cloning? What on earth are the so-called consciousness and soul? If I don't complete this step, I won't be able to truly reconstruct myself, complete the reconstruction of my consciousness, and enter the next stage. After the electromagnetic drive and the reconstruction of matter, the third stage of Li Onping's plan was what he called quantum computation. Just then, a series of footsteps, breathing, and heartbeat entered Li Onping's ears. He waved his hand gently, and the mouse in his hand turned into a row of bubbles, dissipating into the air. 10 minutes later, Xia Yunyan opened the door to the reading room and walked in. She saw Li Onping still floating in midair, surrounded by several tins of books that kept on flipping their pages automatically. "Brotherly, I have something to ask you," Xia Yunyan said sweetly as she looked at Li Onping, who was reading. Li Onping turned and landed on the ground. The books around him closed by themselves, as if there were hands controlling them from a distance. Then they flew back into the bookshelves. "What is it?" Xia Yunyan walked in front of Li Onping and extended her hand. "The organism in my body is called black goo. I've been asking Sure One and the others to research it at the RAS, but I heard that you've been thinking about the problem of consciousness and the soul, so I thought I'd show you this. Maybe it'll help you." It was true that Li Onping had asked the RAS about this recently, but he hadn't been able to fully understand the ability to absorb souls until now. Naturally, the RAS couldn't help him in the slightest. Xia Yunyan, on the other hand, wanted to help Li Onping after hearing Sherwin talk about it. Or rather, she wanted to find an excuse to get closer to him. Following Xia Yunyun's words, a ball of black mucus appeared on her palm. It didn't look like a living thing at all, but it swayed left and right, and even let out a roar, just like a little lion. Oh! Li Onping's gaze immediately focused on Xia Yunyun's palm. Will it affect you if I take some of this black goo? It's fine. Xia Yunyun shook her head and blushed a little when she saw Li Onping staring at her at such a close distance. You can take as much as you want. I don't need a lot. Just a little bit is enough. Li Onping stretched out his right hand. Before the black goo and Xia Yunyun could react, a flash of lightning appeared, and a thumb-sized part of the black goo on Xia Yunyun's palm fell into Li Onping's hand. The cut-off part of the black goo immediately grew back, but its roars were even louder this time. The small ball of black goo in Li Onping's hand also roared and bared its fangs. It looked like there were two of them. Interesting. Is it group awareness or something else? Li Onping scanned the black goo with his mental force field, but he still raised his head and said to Xia Yunyun, "Thank you." Xia Yunyun said happily, "It's fine as long as it's useful to Big Brother Li." Chapter 359. At night, Su Xining stood on the rooftop of the hotel. Looking at the Tianjing night and the busy streets, he sighed faintly. He had a feeling that the prosperity of his city didn't belong to him. Because many of the contents in the booklet were too shocking, he excitedly went to talk to the hotel owner. In the end, he was stopped by Jason, who told him that more than 99% of the contents in the booklet were made up, and that it was as shocking as it could be. Just take it as a pastime. Big Brother Jason, do you think we can pass the test? Jason raised the beer bottle in his hand and took a sip and said casually, "I want to join Academy City just to pursue more power. If I can't get in, I plan to go to Baiwa to try my luck. But I've only learned the Xia language this year. If I go there, I'll have to learn Baiwa language again." Big Brother Jason, you're really amazing. You can actually learn the Xia language in such a short time. Su Xining suddenly raised her head and asked, "I heard that the Western continent has always blocked the news of ability users. What about now? Do the normal people there know about ability users?" Jason smiled and said, "Yes, everyone knows about it. After the Western continent unification war, whether they want to believe it or not, they can only accept it in the end." "Is that so? Actually, I'm very grateful to His Majesty Li Onping," Jason said. "If it wasn't for him, scum at the bottom of society like me wouldn't even know about the existence of the so-called superpowers. I'll probably keep fighting until I save up some money and go back to my hometown to open a small shop, or I'll fall in the ring one day." After that, Jason finished the rest of the beer and threw it on the ground. "Yes, I'm also very grateful to His Majesty." Su Xining nodded, and a smile appeared on her face. "I really like superpowers." While the two were talking, Su Xining's expression suddenly changed. She pointed at a building in front of them and said, "Big Brother Jason, do you see that? There's a girl there." Jason also looked up at the opposite building, but there was nothing. "I didn't see her. She must have left." "She's there." Su Xining pointed to the roof and said, "Look, the one with black hair and white clothes." He suddenly reacted. "I think I've seen her somewhere before." Jason shrugged. "Are you too nervous?" "I can't see anyone at all." Su Xining looked at the girl on the opposite rooftop. The girl was standing at the edge of the rooftop, pacing back and forth. Although he did not know why Jason could not see the girl, he still said, "No, she looks like she wants to commit suicide. I have to stop her." "Hey, are you hallucinating?" "I can't see anything." Jason turned around and found that Su Xining had already rushed down the rooftop. This kid, wait, could it be a metahuman? Jason looked up, but the edge of the roof of the opposite building was still empty. When Su Xining pushed open the iron door and rushed to the roof of the building, she saw that the entire roof was empty. As she left, just as Su Xining was rejoicing, a cold female voice suddenly appeared behind him. "Can you see me?" Su Xining turned around immediately. Under the bright moonlight, a young girl with long black hair, wearing a white robe and standing barefoot on the rooftop was coldly sizing him up. The young girl's face was so perfect that it did not look human. She was like an elf under the moon, emitting a captivating aura. Su Xining was stunned. This young girl was a creature born from the spiritual network. Li Anping used the spiritual energy field of the tens of thousands of clones in Tianjing to create a body. She was completely spiritual and immaterial. She was used to test the condition of the spiritual network and also an experimental body that Li Anping used to study the so-called consciousness. It could be said that this beautiful young girl was an extension of Li Anping's consciousness. If people who were familiar with the Queen of Heaven saw her, they would realize that this young girl was simply a black-haired version of Xia's Queen of Heaven. In fact, this was also a form that Li Anping had purposely created to prevent the situation before him. After all, the spiritual network involved top secrets. If someone like Su Xining saw him while he maintained his original form, it would be too easy for him to attract attention. Seeing Su Xining suddenly blushing, Li Anping clearly did not notice how attractive his current appearance was. He only frowned and said in his usual cold voice, "Hey, are you deaf?" No. Su Xining had never spoken to such a beautiful girl before. She said nervously, "I just saw you here and was afraid that you want to jump off the building." At this moment, the iron door on the rooftop was knocked open again. Jason rushed up with a baton in his hand. When he saw Su Xining, he shouted, "Hey, are you okay?" I thought about it. What you just saw might be a metahuman. However, he saw Su Xining pointing at him in a daze. Ghost. It turned out that the moment Jason rushed out, he had directly passed through Li Anping's body. "Don't be silly. I'm not a ghost." Li Anping frowned. "Normal people can't detect me, and can't touch me or even communicate with me. Only a metahuman like you can see me." After Li Anping finished speaking, he looked at Jason. "But this big blockhead is much more outstanding than you, whether it's alertness or stamina." Su Xining closed her mouth, then suddenly reacted and shouted, "Wait, you said I'm a metahuman?" Jason asked, "What metahuman?" "Xining, who are you talking to?" Li Anping frowned and snapped his fingers with his fair right hand. The next moment, Jason's eyes went blank and he stood still on the spot. Seeing this scene, Su Xining immediately stood in front of Jason and looked at Li Anping warily. "What did you do to Big Brother Jason?" "Another childish fellow. But his ability is indeed a little special, and he's only at level 0. Li Anping looked at Su Xining and said coldly, "He's fine. He'll recover in a minute. You're here to take the entrance test of Academy City, right?" Su Xining was shocked. "How did you know?" Of course, Li Anping wouldn't tell her that the moment he saw Su Xining, he had already exchanged information with the supercomputer into Xiaolong K base through electromagnetic signals. He immediately found out all the information related to Su Xining. It could be said that in less than a second, all the things that had happened to Su Xining since she was young appeared in his mind. Naive, childish, and unrealistic. These were Li Anping's thoughts. In your current state, you definitely won't be able to enter Academy City. Li Anping didn't give the other party a chance to refute and continued with a cold expression. "I need a few special metahumans to conduct some tests. If you're willing to help me, I can teach you how to enter Academy City." "Really?" After Su Xining said that, she immediately asked doubtfully, "But what method do you have? Also, what kind of experiments do you need?" Li Anping couldn't be bothered to say more to Su Xining. He enveloped her with his spiritual force field. His tone was still cold, but in Su Xining's ears, it was incomparably friendly and persuasive. "In short, tomorrow night at 12 o'clock, go to the artificial lake in the Central Park. Other than you, there will be 2 other people. Remember, don't be late." Su Xining nodded. Under the other party's spiritual suggestion, she didn't have any other thoughts. She just felt that she should seize this opportunity. At the next moment, Li Anping nodded and disappeared with the wind. Jason, who was at the side, also woke up at once. He looked at Su Xining and continued the previous topic. "How was it? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Brother Jason. Let's go down." Su Xining's mind was now filled with the beautiful girl who was like a fairy under the moonlight. Into Xia Dragonfinch's office, Bai Xinghe was facing the computer screen. Because he had been sleeping for more than 2,000 years, he didn't know a lot of modern knowledge at first. However, as a level 5 ability user, he had a strong learning ability. In less than 2 years, he had already completed 10 or even 20 years worth of learning. Even now, after becoming the leader of the Xia Dragonfinch, he still didn't give up learning, especially scientific and computer-related knowledge, which was very helpful for his work and the cultivation of various secret martial arts. 2,000 years ago, he studied all kinds of knowledge and learned all the secret martial arts in the divine domain. Today, 2,000 years later, he was still learning. He kept improving himself and his abilities with modern knowledge. If you don't move forward, you will fall behind. That was his belief. He looked down on people like Emma, who was lazy to study and cultivate all day long. He looked down on people like her. At this moment, a staff member knocked on the door. "Come in." "My lord, this is a letter for you." "A letter?" Bai Xinghe took the letter in confusion. He couldn't figure out who would send him a letter in this era. After opening the letter and reading it for only a few seconds, a cluster of red flames rose from Bai Xinghe's palm. There was shock, joy, and hesitation in his eyes. But in the end, the tall figure of a man in a white robe appeared in front of him. Recalling the man's unparalleled strength, fear was drawn into his heart again, mixed with shock, joy, and hesitation. Bai Xinghe had never felt so complicated in his entire life. He raised his head and looked at the staff member in front of him. His eyes were as cold as the edge of a blade. Where did this letter come from? Chapter 360. On the same night, Li Onping changed to the roof of another building. He was still in his long-haired, white-clothed female spiritual form, looking down at the night sky of Tianjing City. The doctor had already begun to set up a global spiritual network. However, because he could not use all of his people to do this, according to Li Onping's calculations, it would take about half a year. Therefore, although the spiritual network in Tianjing had been set up, Li Onping usually only used it to test some problems and did not fully activate it. Even the spiritual network in Zhongdu had been adjusted to a very low value. He planned to wait until the spiritual network covered the whole world before activating it together so that no one would have the chance to react. But right now, the mental network was more useful for him in other ways. He needed to collect more data, do more experiments, and run more tests. Soul, spirit, consciousness, what exactly were they? The 12th nightmare test begins. That night, another 8 people in Tianjing City fell into a terrifying hell. By the time Zhao Wei woke up, he was no longer in his bedroom. Under his body was a wooden floor, and above his head was the beam of a small wooden house. When Zhao Wei hugged his head and stood up shakily, he found himself standing in a small house. A wolf head specimen hung on the wall, and there was a fireplace facing Zhao Wei. The entire house was made of wood. Through the window, he could see a dark forest outside. From the outside, it looked like a federal-style hunter's hut. Other than him, there were 9 other men and women in the room. 5 of them were like him, slowly crawling up from the floor. The other 3 adult men were standing at the side, looking at them with cold gazes. Zhao Wei glanced at them and asked uneasily, "Hello, may I ask where this is?" I remember that before I fell asleep, I was in my bedroom. Among the 3 men, the youngest, who looked very thin and was probably a high school student, stood up and said to Zhao Wei and the other 5 men and women, "Everyone, the information of the realm of nightmare has been injected into your minds. If you think about it carefully, you should know." Zhao Wei listened to his words and began to think carefully. In the blink of an eye, an inexplicable message appeared in his mind. The realm of nightmare was a real space. After being pulled in, he would enter this place every Sunday night. The only thing you need to do is to survive here. As long as you can survive, wealth, power, and authority, you can get anything in this world. Before Zhao Wei could react to the meaning of this message, a middle-aged woman among the remaining 5 had already started arguing. "What are you doing?" she shouted. "Where is this? I still have to go to work tomorrow morning. Why did you kidnap me here?" The young man among the three sneered. The door is right there. If you want to leave, feel free to do so. The middle-aged woman looked at the three of them suspiciously, then walked straight to the door and left. After seeing her leave like this, a man and a woman of working age also left. The only people left in the room were Zhao Wei, a middle-aged man in a suit, and a barefoot girl with black hair and white clothes. When he saw the girl's face, Zhao Wei couldn't help but be stunned because she was very beautiful. At least, she was much more beautiful than the celebrities he saw on TV. 163. When he saw the middle-aged woman and the other two leave, Zhao Wei looked at the girl suspiciously. She seemed to have just said a number. Seeing the three leave, the young man who looked like a high school student sneered a few times and said to Zhao Wei and the other two, "Okay, those three idiots have left. Since you chose to stay, it means that you're not stupid. I'll give you 5 minutes to ask questions." At this time, Zhao Wei had the time to carefully size up the three people who were obviously different from them. Other than the young man who looked like a high school student, the other two were a muscular man wearing a black singlet and a shaved hedgehog head. The other was a young man wearing glasses with slightly long hair and wearing sportswear. When he saw this, Zhao Wei suddenly reacted. He lowered his head and saw the clothes on his body. He clearly remembered that he was sleeping on the bed, but now he had changed into a set of shirt and trousers that he usually wore to work. Just as he was surprised, the middle-aged man in a suit had already started to ask, "Where is this? Who are you? Why am I here?" His eyes were full of vigilance and doubt. Obviously, he did not believe in the realm of nightmare at all. However, out of some consideration, he did not rush out with the middle-aged woman and the others. The gentleman with glasses replied, "We don't know where this is. Every nightmare will lead us to a different world. There's basically no chance of success. As for us, we've only experienced a few more worlds than you." The high school student on the other side continued, "My name is Lin Ku. The one with glasses is Miao Ji. The muscular man is Qin Zhuang. Ever since you entered the realm of nightmare, you'll come in once a week and experience a world. These worlds may be myths, legends, novels, games, animations, movies. In short, they're all very dangerous. If you're not careful, you might die." "Die?" The middle-aged man was surprised. "You mean we might die? What do you think?" Link, who looked like a high school student, said disdainfully, "Up until now, I've confirmed that 30 people have died in the realm of nightmare. Do you think this is an amusement park that ends with a dream every week?" The middle-aged man frowned and said, "But isn't this a nightmare? It's called the realm of nightmare. And won't we go back after we wake up?" "That's right. After we wake up, we'll return to our original world. It feels like a dream." Miao Ji pressed his eyes and sneered at the middle-aged man. "But if you really think this is just a dream, then try killing yourself. Let me tell you in advance, in the 3 worlds I've experienced before, I've memorized the faces and names of 15 victims. After I went back, I investigated them. They all died of various accidents and diseases on the same day." What Miaoji did not know was that although Li Anping could simulate most natural phenomena after mastering electromagnetic force, strong interaction force, and weak interaction force, he could also show the various changes in the realm of nightmare to their own bodies. However, he did not really kill the dead. He only erased their memories in the realm of nightmare. Then, he modified the memories of Lin Ku and the other survivors, changing the faces and names of the dead to the people who died in Tianjin that day. The middle-aged man was shocked when he heard this. He then asked, "Are you saying that if we die here, we will die in an accident outside?" "Who knows?" The muscular man, Qin Zhuang, said, "I only know that everything that happens here will affect our physical bodies in the real world. The strength I train here can also be used in the real world. Just treat this place as a real world." Zhao Wei also asked, "Then how do we go back? Do we have to experience the realm of nightmare every week in the future?" "I don't know." Miaoji smiled bitterly and said, "At least so far, we haven't found any way to completely leave this space. Could it be some kind of ability?" Zhao Wei suddenly shouted, "Have you tried to report what happened here to the government? If the Emperor knows, do you think we haven't tried such a simple thing? Lin Ke said angrily, we can't do it at all. After leaving the realm of nightmare, we can't say a word about any information about this place. The three of us can't even communicate about this place. Miao Ji clapped his hands and said, okay, that's the end of the question. He looked at the nervous Zhao Wei, the middle-aged man who was still full of vigilance, and the barefoot girl who had not said a word since she appeared with a cold expression. When he saw the girl's appearance, a trace of pity flashed in his eyes. Based on his experience, girls like this were often the group of people who were most likely to die. Now, tell me your names and occupations. If we want to live, we have to work together. We have to work together. Zhao Wei nodded. My name is Zhao Wei. I do interface design. Qian Lin. I do business. Miaoji looked at the silent girl and asked, what about you? What's your name? The 5 men present looked at the girl together. No matter who it was, there was a trace of surprise in their eyes when they looked at the girl. At the same time, they were also looking forward to what the girl's voice sounded like. The girl said coldly, hey, you can call me Hey. At this moment, a series of shrill screams suddenly sounded in the forest outside the house. It's the 3 guys who just went out. Then, they saw the middle-aged woman who had just rushed out run in with her face covered in blood. She closed the door and leaned her body against the back of the door. She screamed crazily, zombie, zombie. In the end, a sickle pierced through the back of the door and pierced through her chest. 123. This time, Lin Ke seemed to have heard it more clearly. He turned his head to look at the girl who called herself Hey. She seemed to have just said another number. On the other side, Lin Ke and the others had already moved. There's something outside. Block the door. Seeing this, the middle-aged man's expression changed, and he ran to the other side of the house. In the end, he had only run a few steps when a female zombie with a rotten body rushed out from the shadows with an axe in her hand. She chopped his head with the axe. In the next moment, a few more zombies rushed in from the back door through the window. Chapter 361. On the other side, Qin Zhuang was pushed to the ground by a zombie. He struggled frantically, but he could not shake off the zombie on his body. 92. Then it was Lin Ke and Miao Ji's turn. A 2-meter-tall zombie with chains and sides in its hands slammed open the door and dragged the 2 of them out. 45. 62. Zhao Wei watched the bloody scene in front of him with his eyes wide open. The fear that seeped into his bones made him unable to move. Only the girl beside him reported 3 unknown numbers one by one. In the next moment, Zhao Wei was completely drowned by the swarm of zombies. Before he died, he could only see the girl looking at him coldly. There was not the slightest change in expression on that beautiful face, as if she was looking at a little white mouse. 12. The next second, Zhao Wei opened his eyes again. Below his body was a wooden floor, and above his head was what seemed to be the roof beam of a small wooden house. When Zhao Wei stood up shakily, holding his head, he found himself standing in a small house, and the memory of the previous scene had been erased. It was still a similar scene. The only difference was that the barefoot girl was no longer among these people. This time, there were only 8 of them. Lian Ping, who had transformed into a barefoot girl, quietly watched the various performances of the 8 people in the wooden house and recorded the numbers of their various choices and outcomes. Hundreds of experiences, but the choices that each person makes at each moment are limited. As the number of times gradually increases, the probability of each choice they make appears. What makes the choice? The brain? The brain is just a pile of atoms. It's also made of various atoms. What's the difference between it and a stone or a piece of soil? Breaking down the atoms of a stone and then replacing the atoms of the brain. There's no difference. Then, how did our brain give birth to something like consciousness? In front of Lianping, it was like countless television screens were flashing. Each screen was filled with various people's experiences in the realm of nightmare. They were either surrounded by zombies, surviving in the wilderness, or fighting monsters in space. Different people, different environments, but everyone made their own choices according to a certain pattern. Every time the plot was repeated, the data they chose would be summarized and sent to Lianping. As thousands of people continued to be reincarnated, their data quickly exceeded 200G and kept increasing. Similarly, as the number of times increased, the probability of each choice became more and more obvious. What is consciousness? Brain activity? But most people can't feel their brain activity at all. When he wants to get up, he bends down, props his hands up, and gets out of bed. When he wants to eat, he shoves the spoon into his mouth. The food enters his stomach and begins to be digested. Exercise, digestion, sleep. We don't need to direct our bodies. He does it subconsciously. Ordinary people have no idea how the brain works. It's like a function of a computer. Humans only input and output. Modern science believes that consciousness is a combination pattern. Just like the music score itself is not a tune. The information recorded in the music score is a tune. The pages and words are non-novel. The content recorded on the paper is. Consciousness, on the other hand, was a combination of atoms. It formed an extremely complicated algorithm. When we input the content, it will automatically output the result. Ordinary people can't control the process. On the 13th floor of the Imperial Library, Lianping's hands were emitting dense blue electric light. Clouds of air were constantly changing in his hands. It began to gradually multiply from cell and slowly turn into a huge ball of meat. Just like basic words, different words combine and a novel is born. Atoms combine in a special way and consciousness will be born. But everyone's consciousness is still different. Everyone's consciousness is like a unique function. In Lianping's eyes, it was as if thousands of people were constantly reincarnating in the realm of nightmare, constantly making choices. Different inputs lead to different results. Every function is unique. Even if two functions have the same input, they may produce different results. But this algorithm is too complicated. It's so complicated that even if a person's entire life is input into a supercomputer, it's difficult to predict what he will do in the next second with 100% certainty. No, it's impossible to predict. Humans are made up of unpredictable atoms. It's just that there's a certain probability on a macroscopic level. Not only that, human consciousness is more advanced than ordinary functions. The electric light in Lianping's hands became more and more intense. In the midst of the blue lightning, a palm-sized cat slowly opened its eyes. Human consciousness has the ability to self-correct. Every choice and every action will correct human consciousness. It's just like writing a function. However, humans don't write it in source code. They write it through the coding tools of behavior and environment. It's more intelligent and macroscopic. Therefore, everyone's consciousness is changing at every moment. With the same input, the answer 10 years ago was 30% likely to choose A and 70% likely to choose B. 10 years later, the answer became 90% to choose C and 10% to choose D. The electric light in Lianping's hands slowly dissipated. A cat with gray and white fur looked at him and meowed softly. Meow. The kitten looked no different from an ordinary cat. It was equally cute and agile. The animal's consciousness algorithm is too simple. It's like creating a simple artificial intelligence. Lianping looked at the cat in front of him and casually placed it on the ground. It's difficult for me to predict what it will do in the next second with 100% accuracy, but I know all its possible choices. Because of its consciousness algorithm, its functions were compiled by me. But it's not complicated enough. The difference between it and humans is too great. Self-correction still can't be written in combination mode. Is it because the algorithm is insufficient, or the kitten ran to Lianping's feet and rubbed against him with its body? Then it meowed a few times. There's still something missing. What exactly is still missing? Lianping raised his head. His eyes pierced through the roof of the Empire's library and looked at the endless starry sky. In Tianjing, thousands of people were constantly experiencing all kinds of unbelievable adventures. Countless people's choices, data, and life and death revolutions appeared in Lianping's eyes. What exactly is missing Just as Lianping was still trying to perfect the second stage of matter reorganization and preparing to break into the third stage of quantum computing in the distant Codex Nation in the Death Zone. Originally, it had been ravaged by monsters all year round. Later, it was ravaged by the battle between Lianping, Hygrum, and Gabu. Now, it was almost a completely uninhabited zone. It was only after the unification of the Western continent that the Codex Nation slowly began to recover. However, because of the battle with Hygrum, the Codex Nation's vitality was greatly damaged. That was why the reconstruction of the Death Zone was arranged to be done at a very late stage. However, in the depths of this uninhabited underground, countless densely packed metal bugs were continuously excavating and constructing. In a hall made entirely of metal, Shang Tian was sitting on a chair. A laptop was placed on the table in front of him. Shang Tian, who was more than 2 years old, was fiddling with his little hands as he tapped on the keyboard. Behind him, Night Beast slowly walked up. "Little Tian, the letter has been delivered." "Thank you, Uncle Night." Shang Tian turned his head and smiled at Night Beast. In the next moment, he continued to tap on the keyboard. Meanwhile, Night Beast stood behind him, silently guarding him. In less than 2 months, this little boy, who was clearly less than 2 years old, had exploded with amazing wisdom and talent. If Shang Tian was said to only be a genius before, then his actions during these 2 months were already enough to make others feel horrified. Even a level 5 ability user like Night Beast wholeheartedly convinced of his abilities. Meanwhile, on the other side of the table was a youth with a buzz cut. He raised his feet and placed them on the table, the clothes on his body releasing a series of ding-dang-dang sounds. "How much longer do we have to wait? In these 2 months, you only contacted this group of trash. Apart from those few robots, the others are nothing more than a group of trash. Be patient, Kadia." Shang Tian took a sip of the coffee on the table, revealing a confident smile. "The underwater base of Freezing Ocean has already begun to be established. The opportunity will come soon. What exactly are you waiting for?" The youth called Kadia looked at Shang Tian in confusion. "If Lianping is really like you say, advancing towards the end with large strides, we don't have the time to stay here and drink tea and chat. However, on Earth, I've already done everything I can do. Next, we need to wait for a friend." "A friend?" "Yes, a friend." Shang Tian revealed a mysterious smile. "When I see him on the news, we can set off. We'll go to World 01. We'll kill Lianping there." Speaking up to this point, Shang Tian's eyes were already filled with resentment. A murderous aura that did not match his 2-year-old body surged out, causing Kadia to feel a chill run down his spine. The hatred and resentment contained within was so deep that it shocked even him. Just how great is the enmity between this guy and Lianping? After a long while, the seething murderous aura in Shang Tian's eyes gradually calmed down, turning into a bone-chilling coldness. "Let me put a stop to this calamity of the multiverse and put an end to the sins of our family." Chapter 362. 3 days later, into Xia Dragonfinch's underground training ground. Bai Xinghe, Xiao Laikong, Fang Yuhuang, and Emma, a total of 4 level, 5 ability users, stood together. Emma yawned and said, "Why did you call us here so early? Do you know?" "No idea." Fang Yuhuang smiled and said, "It probably has something to do with those demons. After all, when the time comes, only His Majesty will be able to deal with those demons." "Demons?" Emma's eyes also showed a trace of worry. She remembered the information about Hygrum. The combat power he displayed was on a completely different level from that of a level 5 ability user. Are we going to have to deal with such terrifying things in the future? Emma sighed. "Just do what you're supposed to do." After Bai Xinghe said this, the 4 of them did not say anything else. Currently, in the entire Pan-Continent Alliance, Bai Xinghe was the strongest level 5 ability user. After he presided over the unification of the Western continent and took over Xia Dragonfinch, his prestige grew day by day. It could be said that among the ability users, he had become the strongest after Lianping. In the silence, the steel door of the training ground opened automatically. Lianping slowly walked in alone. "Your Majesty." The four of them lowered their heads and greeted at the same time. Lianping waved his hand and said, "Don't move. I'll give you something." Then his body flashed, and he pointed at the foreheads of Bai Xinghe and the other three. With this point, the strength of the four was revealed. Because of the difference in strength, their reactions were also different. The first one to be hit was Emma. Among the four of them, her reaction was the worst, and her close-range combat ability was also the weakest. Facing Lianping's casual point, she could not react at all and was directly hit. Emma's eyes suddenly froze. Her whole body was motionless, as if she had been frozen. Next was Xiao Laikong and Feng Yuhuang. The two of them had been through hundreds of battles and were very experienced. When Lianping pointed his finger at them, they instinctively wanted to dodge. It was not because of distrust or hostility, but it was purely a warrior's instinct when facing a sudden attack. However, even though Lianping had casually pointed at them, his speed was too fast for them. The moment he pointed at them, a strong gust of wind blew against their faces. The two of them only felt a slight chill on their foreheads, and just like Emma, they became motionless. In the end, he pointed his finger at Bai Xinghe. Compared to Feng Yuhuang, Xiao Laikong, and Emma, he was hundreds of times more experienced in battles. His control over his body, his reflexes, and his melee combat skills had all reached the peak. When Lianping pointed at him, he already understood a fact. He could dodge, but it was not enough to dodge Lianping's finger. Therefore, he simply did not dodge, and there was no trace of panic in his eyes. He simply allowed Lianping's finger to touch his forehead lightly and left. After being hit by the finger, he finally understood why Emma, Xiao Laikong, and Feng Yuhuang were standing there like idiots. Lianping's finger was not an attack, but a huge amount of information. Various understandings about the 5th and 6th energy levels, mental and material understandings. There was so much content that it could be compared to a library. At this moment, Lianping's cold voice sounded in their ears. "This is the Queen of Heaven's understanding about the 5th and 6th energy levels. There are too many things that can only be understood but not explained. Therefore, I called you here directly and injected it into your consciousness. Don't resist. Just experience it. I hope you can break through the 5th energy level." After saying that, Lianping looked at the four people who were still standing there like idiots and left. The reason why he gave them the Queen of Heaven's understanding instead of Lianping's energy system was that Lianping's own energy system, from electromagnetic drive to material reconstruction, and then quantum computation, was not perfected. Moreover, other people could not use it all. Just the computing power that was comparable to that of a supercomputer was enough to exclude almost all of the humans on Earth. After leaving the training room, the door was closed again. More than 10 level 4 ability users were waiting outside, waiting for the 4 people to come out. As for the 4 people's subordinates, Lianping had already ordered them to temporarily take over. They must not affect the 4 people's understanding this time. As for Woody and Eddie, Lianping thought about it and decided not to give them the gift immediately. Firstly, it was because the two of them had only joined for a short period of time. If they were to receive the same treatment as Bai Xinghe and Xiao Laikong, it would be unfair. Secondly, it was too easy for humans to become ambitious, especially after they had obtained great power. Although Lianping did not care if they were loyal or not, he was unwilling to destroy the high-end power of humans again. Therefore, he decided to wait for Bai Xinghe, Feng Yuhuang, Xiao Laikong, and Emma to make a breakthrough before he went to Woody and Judy. Lianping took a few steps. The next moment, his body seemed to have turned into a thin mist. With a slight breeze, he left the base at a speed that was hard to be seen by the human eye. After returning to the Empire's library, Lianping no longer looked at the theoretical books. Instead, he looked at the kitten in front of him. He watched the kitten perform all kinds of actions. Occasionally, he would flick his finger a few times. Suddenly, the kitten's body trembled, and it stood up. It started to walk around on its two hind legs like a human. Ugly, Lianping said, and flicked his finger again. The kitten returned to its original appearance. He was changing the cat's consciousness by modifying the atomic arrangement of the cat's brain. It meant that he was changing a very simple function into something more complicated. It was also a kind of accumulation for him to reorganize his consciousness. At this moment, Yinbei pushed open the door of the reading room and walked in. Lianping said without turning his head, "You're back from New Danyang." "Yes." Yinbei was silent. Ever since he was heavily injured by Hygrim's gaze, he had felt his weakness even more deeply and was more eager to become stronger. After he recovered from the hospital bed, he ignored the outside world and devoted himself to training crazily. Last month, he went to New Danyang alone and began an ascetic journey. Lianping glanced at him, and Yinbei felt that he had been seen through. He has become stronger again. Thinking of this, Yinbei raised his head and looked at Lianping. He said, "Your Majesty, I want to become stronger. Can you help me?" Lianping glanced at him coldly, then turned his gaze back to the kitten. Under his manipulation, the kitten's consciousness kept on being modified, making all kinds of complicated actions. "I can, but you should know that ordinary methods are no longer effective for you. My ability is different from yours. Your ability to collapse is a very powerful ability that is very difficult to level up. If I want to help you, the method might be more violent." Yinbei nodded seriously and said, "It's okay. I can accept any method. Even if you die." Yinbei was stunned. The next moment, his gaze turned resolute. "The weak don't even have the right to choose how they die in this world. If I can't become a strong person and live on, I'd rather die immediately." Lianping smiled. "All right then." His gaze turned cold, and at the next moment, he pressed his palm against Yinbei's forehead. "Then you'll have to do your best to live on." At the next moment, Yinbei's vision turned black. The Empire's library and Lianping had disappeared from his sight. What appeared in front of him, once again, was an incomparably vast and empty space. Everything that entered his eyes was white and empty. Lianping's voice seemed to have come from the sky, entering his ears. "This is your dreamscape, but I've already combined your physical body with your dreamscape." Yinbei lowered his head and looked at his body, then clenched his fists. He did not feel that this was a dreamscape at all. "So, any harm you receive in this dreamscape will be reflected on your body faithfully." Yinbei smiled and said coldly, "That means that if I die here, I'll really die, right?" "That's right. In this dreamscape, you'll meet stronger and stronger opponents. In this environment, other than yourself, you can't rely on anything else." At the next moment, countless particles appeared in front of Yinbei. They kept combining and gradually formed a human figure. It was a very beautiful young man. He looked at his body that was slowly combining and opened his mouth. "Me? I'm not dead." "Qing Chan." Yinbei looked at the person in front of him. He did not expect this dead person who had only appeared in the information to appear again. He mumbled, "I see. You want me to deal with strong opponents in this dreamscape?" At the next moment, he had already rushed out. With a wave of his hands, a collapsed space opened up with Qing Chan's head as the center. Before Qing Chan could react, his head had already been blasted apart, and he fell to the ground. "It's over." Yinbei looked around. Who's next? However, at that moment, a huge white hand reached out from Qing Chan's corpse and grabbed Yinbei. "You want to kill me the moment you come up? Are you crazy?" Following Qing Chan's words, the huge hand exerted force and squeezed Yinbei into a pile of minced meat. Qing Chan's ability was giant transformation. After reaching the 5th level, his unbelievably beautiful body was not his real body at all. At the next second, Yinbei opened his eyes again. "Me? I'm not dead," Qing Chan mumbled. Yinbei rushed towards Qing Chan again. Lianping shook his head. He did not tell Yinbei the truth about this dreamscape. Yinbei would not really die here. Every time he died, his dream would end, and he would enter the next dream and repeat until he won. Then, he would fight the next enemy. For Yinbei, He would think that he was struggling between life and death every time and then won. Just like that, he would constantly stimulate his potential in life and death situations. However, this method still had its shortcomings. For level 4 ability users, Li Onping could only modify their dreams. He could not change their memories as he wished. Therefore, he could only do this once. A person's mind and body had their limits. If they still could not break through after reaching their limits, they might never be able to break through. Chapter 363. Yin Bei wasn't the only one working hard. The Royal Academy of Sciences in New Danyang City. 30 floors underground. Inside a room made entirely of silver-white metal, Golden Light was panting as he paced back and forth, his upper body bare. The golden aura around his body kept expanding, and he had transformed into a blond man. Golden Light, who was in his transformed state, was 10 times stronger and faster than before. Even so, he still stumbled with every step he took, as if he had just learned how to walk. Next to Jing Guang was a girl with short blue hair. She was holding the original sword of Tatsuka that should have been in by Xinghe's hands. Seeing that Jing Guang was having trouble walking, she shouted, "My lord, should we lower the gravity?" "No need." Jing Guang turned down the girl's suggestion and continued to move under the restraint of the multiple times gravity. After walking for more than half an hour, his steps became steadier and steadier. He had gotten used to the change in gravity. During this time, sweat kept dripping from his body and almost turned the ground under his feet into a small pool. Feeling the weakness coming from all over his body, Jing Guang took out a bottle of white reagent from his waist pocket and gulped it down. It was the immortality potion refined by the Royal Academy of Sciences. It could greatly increase a person's vitality, but Jing Guang used it to replenish his stamina and energy. Of course, it was also because the Royal Academy of Sciences technology had improved greatly. The refinement of the immortality potion wasn't as difficult as it used to be. Jing Guang relied on the immortality potion to replenish his energy and trained under the multiple times gravity in his transformed state. He had been in this state for 5 days. He had never tried to maintain his transformed state for such a long time. He was trying his best to activate the potential in his body. But even with the immortality potion, his stamina was greatly depleted. But when he thought of Yin Bei and how that guy defeated him in 30 seconds on the first day he came back from New Danyang City, he felt a sense of humiliation from the bottom of his heart. "It's not enough." Jing Guang turned his head and said to the blue-haired girl, "Double the gravity. But just do as I say. I'll take responsibility if anything goes wrong." The blue-haired girl nodded helplessly. She mobilized her aura and increased the output of gravity in the sword of Tatsuka again. Golden Light let out a muffled groan as the sudden increase in gravity pressed him to the ground, forcing him to kneel on one knee. "My lord, are you all right?" The blue-haired girl immediately became nervous and was about to cancel the Tatsuka sword's ability. However, he saw that Jing Guang had already raised a hand to stop him. "Don't stop. That's it." The muscles all over Jing Guang's body began to tremble. The golden chi surged once again, and he actually stood up slowly, trembling all over. That's the feeling. When Golden Light maintained his transformed state for more than 12 hours, he felt extremely tired. When the time passed 24 hours, a feeling that he had reached his limit kept pressuring him, telling him to stop. However, he did not stop and chose to continue. The feeling of being on the verge of collapse filled the insides of his body. It was not until the 5th day that Jing Guang noticed the difference. His body began to change, and an unprecedented feeling filled his heart. It was as if the Nianqi in his body was fusing with his body, and the burden of the transformation seemed to be lessening. On the same night, Su Xining quietly climbed out of bed and walked toward the Central Park. The entrance test for the Academy City had already ended. Jason was tested to have mutated abilities, and Su Xining was deemed to be an incompetent person, just like the previous time. She had also been eliminated from the incompetent entrance test. Right now, the lady who had spoken to him on the tall building had become his last hope. Su Xining climbed over the wall and walked carefully on the grass in the Central Park, heading in the direction of the artificial lake. Could what she said be true? Am I an ability user or not? Right at this time, a palm slapped him on the shoulder, giving him a big fright. Ah! He turned around and saw a young man standing behind him. He retracted his hand with an embarrassed look on his face. Sorry for scaring you. The young man smiled. You're also going to the artificial lake? Su Xining nodded warily. He suddenly recalled the barefooted lady's words. He was not the only one who had come. Nie Xian, who was standing in front of him, smiled and nodded. Then we're classmates from now on. Let's go together. Therefore, Su Xining followed Nie Xian to the artificial lake in a daze. Along the way, Su Xining, who was not scheming at all, was easily exposed by Nie Xian in just a few sentences. Then they saw two young ladies at the artificial lake. The moment they saw Li Anping, whether it was Nie Xian or Su Xining, their breathing became a little heavier. All right, let's start then, Li Anping said to Su Xining and Nie Xian after seeing them arrive. Nie Xian and the other young lady who looked to be in her teens sat down cross-legged and closed their eyes. Su Xining asked at a loss, "What do I need to do?" Being so close to the young lady made him feel a little uncomfortable. Do according to this. Before she finished speaking, a piece of paper had already floated into Su Xining's hands. What was recorded on it was something called the Diamond Spiritual Cultivation Method. It was a method to train spiritual power that the Heavenly Queen had summarized. Although it was only the most basic part, it was already very profound for the three people in front of him. Immediately, the three of them slowly cultivated under Li Anping's guidance. Under the scan of his spiritual power, Li Anping saw the state of their cultivation, the changes in the human spirit and the operation of consciousness. Every bit of it was recorded. The entire human world was like a fully wound machine. Under Li Anping's will, it developed at an unprecedented speed. All kinds of technology that far surpassed this era entered people's lives one after another. With the help of the warp gate, the entire world was tightly connected. Controllable nuclear fusion and the vacuum zero-point energy extractor that Li Anping created later solved almost all of the energy problems. The technology obtained from the God King and the various engineering robots developed by the Royal Academy of Sciences had gradually liberated humans from physical labor. There had never been a moment when superpowers had truly become something that all humans were familiar with. It even appeared in many people's daily lives. 3 months after the Western continent's unification war, the global economy had grown by 20%. Because of the liberation of productivity and the inexhaustible supply of energy, social welfare had greatly increased, and people no longer had to rush about for work. Human society gradually entered an unprecedented golden age. Some people called it the Golden Age. Codex Nation, under the frozen ocean. The underwater world that was close to 12,000 meters deep was still silent. However, countless sparkling lights illuminated this land of death, as if it was daytime. At this time, the entire area around the warp gate was completely covered by a large number of fortifications. The warp gate was directly exposed to the bottom of the sea, because the sea water that was more than 12,000 meters deep was naturally the best defense. Under this kind of pressure, most demons with abilities below level 5 would not be able to survive in this environment. Electromagnetic waves, infrared rays, sonar, and other detection devices covered the entire warp gate and its surroundings. Once something came out of it, it would send a signal to Tianjing, the Xia Dragonfinch's headquarters. Meanwhile, the psychic incarnation directly sat at the bottom of the sea 50 meters in front of the warp gate. The psychic energy on its body also completely covered the warp gate, always maintaining a detection posture. Right in this deathly silence, Hygram, who was imprisoned in the psychic incarnation's chest, spoke. Li Anping, we've already said everything that needs to be said. When exactly are you planning on letting us go? Seeing that the psychic incarnation had no intention of replying, Hygrim's eyes revealed a trace of ruthlessness, shooting a look towards Gabe. In the next moment, a huge explosion appeared within the psychic incarnation, almost making his entire body swell. Self-destruct. Liamping did his best to control the explosive force within his body so that it didn't leak out. He didn't expect that level 5 ability, user named Gabe, to actually self-destruct. Meanwhile, the power of his self-destruction far exceeded his expectations, far greater than Gabe's own fighting strength. Meanwhile, the current psychic incarnation was already far too weak compared to Li Anping's original body. Once this wave of explosive force broke through his body, it would most likely turn the surrounding base into ruins. The psychic incarnation had no choice but to use all of its strength to suppress this explosive force within its body. However, even though it was a bit unexpected, this wave of explosive force would only delay Li Anping for 2 or 3 seconds at most. However, in the next moment, red light erupted from Hygrim's body. Borrowing the power of Gabe's self-destruction, he actually directly broke through the psychic incarnation's restriction, rushing straight towards the surface of the sea. You're courting death. 2 seconds later, the psychic incarnation suppressed the explosive force. Its entire body turned into a streak of black light, also rushing out. The two's departure caused the entire seabed to become silent once more. Only the various types of equipment still faithfully carried out the original plan. They scanned the surrounding seabed situation over and over again. Because the entire underwater base's environment was too vile, and because of the psychic incarnation's protection, there weren't any living people. Everything was monitored by machines and Liamping. Not long after the psychic incarnation left, a foot reached out from the world crossing gate. It looked like a human's foot, but despite stepping on the seabed 12,000 meters deep, it was completely unharmed. In the next moment, a person made his way out from the world crossing gate. Chapter 364. It was a man who walked out from the portal. He looked no different from an ordinary earthling, but he was wearing tattered linen clothes that looked like some kind of prison uniform. There seemed to be a thin layer of membrane on the outside of his body, which prevented the water pressure from acting on him directly. When he saw the underwater world before him, as well as the underwater bases created by the Federation, a curious expression appeared on his face. What a strange metal shell. I can't sense any magic waves, but there's light. Creature detection. There aren't any living creatures inside. However, just then, 3 engineering robots were launched from the base, and they swam toward the prisoner's location at high speed. Puppets? I still can't sense any magic waves. What a strange world. As the engineering robot approached him, a net shot out from the robot's body towards the prisoner. Foolish living creatures. Are you trying to challenge the mage's authority? The prisoner raised his palm, and endless cold air spread out from his body. In an instant, it gushed toward the seabed in all directions. It was as if an ice lotus had bloomed, freezing all the buildings within a radius of 1,000 meters, including the engineering robots. Seeing that the enemies in the surroundings had been eliminated, the prisoner-like man broke into a smug smile. In the next moment, he soared into the sky, rising toward the surface of the sea. In the process of rising, his figure gradually became transparent until it gradually disappeared. The moment the man appeared, Li Anping, who was far away in Tianjing, had already received the news. The information was transmitted to his mind through electromagnetic waves, and then he restored it into a 3-dimensional image before his eyes. Why would a human come from the White Land? Li Anping frowned. Is it a demon that looks like a human? Is it a coincidence that Hygrim lured his psychic energy clone away at this moment? Or was it premeditated? Li Anping heard the man's voice again. It was the last voice recorded by the surveillance equipment, but he could not understand what the other party meant. Is this your language? What does it mean? Li Anping thought about it, but unfortunately, there were too few clues and he couldn't come to a conclusion. Right then, Bai Xinghe's image appeared before him. My lord, we've lost contact with the portal. Should we send someone over? There's no need for that for now. Once we capture Higram, I'll send my psychic incarnation over first. Li Amping ordered. He looked at the prisoner in the three-dimensional image and said coldly, "Find this guy who came out of the portal first and capture him." Understood. The last image in Li Amping's image was the base that was gradually being destroyed. He frowned and thought, I was too careless. The bottom of the sea is not suitable for other people to fight in. I thought that it would be enough to let the Nianxi clone guard the base. I didn't expect that I would still make a mistake. It seems like I need to increase my strength in this area. At the same time, the 30 prophetic satellites that surrounded the entire Earth were in full operation, and they began to search for the man in the prison uniform that appeared on the screen. The man's face appeared in the police, the internet, and the news. However, the government did not reveal the man's real identity. Instead, they said that he was an aptitude user who was on the run and was highly aggressive. North of the Lost State, Death Zone. Shang Tian looked at the new wanted poster that appeared on the internet and smiled. Here's the chance. Let's go, Kadia. Let's go to world number 1. Is it finally done? Kadia stood up and stretched. His whole body made clanking sounds. But what about Li Amping? His psychic incarnation might return to the portal at any time. So we have to hurry. Shang Tian typed quickly on the keyboard and called over the few team members that he had chosen. Now that Li Amping has temporarily lost the surveillance of the portal, as long as we seize this opportunity to go in, he won't know that we've already gone over. I'm afraid we won't encounter such a coincidence again in the future. A few minutes later, Shang Tian, Kadia, and more than a dozen men and women had already set off toward the location of the portal. On the other side, the man who walked out of the portal had arrived at a small town in the north of the Lost State after a few hours of flying. Looking at the very prosperous town in front of him, and the buildings made entirely of reinforced concrete, the man remained invisible and quietly sneaked in. In a house, he glanced at the body at his feet. It was a blonde woman, but at this moment, she had fallen to the ground with a pale face. Her body was still emitting bursts of cold air. Next to the woman, a man with the same blonde hair was kneeling. He was trembling all over as he looked at the man who looked like a prisoner. "Please don't kill me. The money is in the safe. You can take whatever you want." The prisoner glanced at him uninterestedly. "It's not the common language, nor is it the imperial language. Is it the unique language of the natives here? There's no other way." He lifted a finger, and a white light shot out from his fingertip, flying toward the blond man's forehead. Try language proficiency. At the next moment, the light touched the blond man's forehead, and then returned to the man's palm, disappearing. With this, he realized that he could understand what this native was saying. "Shut up." The blond man spoke up once again, this time in the Lost State's language fluently. "I'm not interested in your so-called wealth at all." He stroked his chin and said to the blond man, "Native, what's your name?" "Henry," Henry said with a trembling voice. Each time he saw the nanny's corpse on the ground, a hint of terror would flash in his eyes. "You can call me Lord Jonah," the man named Jonas said. The man who called himself Jonas said, "Now, I'm a little hungry. Help me get something to eat first." I understand." Henry stood up, feeling a little apprehensive. Then he headed toward the kitchen. In his heart, Jonah had already become a strange ability user. Damn it. Shouldn't all ability users have been accepted into the various academies? Where did this lunatic come from? Although this was what Henry thought, when he turned and saw that the other party had disintegrated the nanny's corpse into pieces that were hard to be seen by the naked eye, the terror in his heart became even more intense. Jonah turned and looked at Henry, whose expression was filled with terror. He smiled eerily. "Henry, I'm already very hungry. You don't want me to eat one of your arms, right? I got it. I'll get something to eat for you right away." Henry walked quickly to the fridge. "In any case, I'll just get him something to eat first." Taking a look at the things in the fridge, he asked Jonah, "Sir, can you eat instant noodles?" "Instant noodles? What's that?" As Jonah spoke, he looked at the lights on the ceiling with a curious gaze. "Anything. Just a set of instant noodles." When Henry brought a bowl of instant noodles to the living room, he saw that Jonah was quickly pressing the switch on the wall. He looked at the flashing lights above his head and seemed to be deep in thought. Interesting trick. Seeing Henry bring the bowl of instant noodles over, he twitched his nose. It smells good. After tasting a mouthful of instant noodles, he revealed a delighted expression. Not bad, not bad. This instant noodles tastes good. Looking at the other party eating the instant noodles happily, Henry thought to himself, is this guy from the countryside? However, what Jonah did next seemed to confirm his guess even more. When Henry explained to Jonah that the toilet bowl in the toilet could draw out water an unlimited number of times, Jonah's eyes revealed obvious disbelief. Mortal, are you trying to deceive a mage? Jonah pointed at the toilet bowl and said, this thing doesn't have any magic waves. How can it create water out of thin air? Henry tried to explain the water pipe, water pressure, and water valve to him. However, even he himself was not very clear about the theory behind it. Naturally, it was impossible for him to explain it clearly to Jonah. However, after Jonah tried to draw out the toilet bowl dozens of times, he had to admit that this mortal before him was not deceiving him. Interesting and foolish aborigines. Have you all invested all your energy into how to enjoy yourselves? Faced with Jonah's strong martial prowess, Henry could only choose to secretly despise this country bumpkin before him. After studying the water pipe, circuit, lights, fridge, and gas stove in the house, Jonah changed into Henry's pajamas and lay down on the sofa. He thought, what a bunch of aborigines who are greedy for pleasure. He then touched the soft sofa and the silk pajamas he was wearing. What soft chair, and this shirt, such exquisite craftsmanship. I'm afraid that even the Emperor's chief tailor doesn't have such craftsmanship. However, after studying the installations in Henry's house for a while, Jonah recalled the reason for his visit. However, after asking a few times, he realized that Henry had never heard of the Holy Roland Empire, the Mages Guild, or Carmel. Henry was even more clueless about the magic that Jonah was most concerned about. It was as if magic had only appeared in novels and dramas here. Seems like this continent is very far away from the Empire. To think that there isn't even any knowledge of magic here. What a remote place. However, thinking that this place was still in an ignorant period without magic, Jonah's worries disappeared. Since there aren't any mages on this continent, then I don't have to worry about anything. However, I can't just listen to the words of this mortal. Perhaps the mages here are hermits, and his level isn't high enough to come into contact with them. Maybe I can meet their king first. Since no one here knows me, I can just make up a story. If there are mages here, then I'll join them. If there aren't any mages, After thinking for a while, Jonah asked again, do you have a king here? If I want to meet the king, what should I do? Jonah raised his chin high and said with a unique pride, as the representative of the Holy Roland Empire's Mages Guild, I request to meet the king of the most powerful country on this continent. Is this guy crazy? However, Henry naturally wouldn't say it out loud. He thought for a while and said slowly, if you insist on talking about a king, there is one. However, I'm afraid it won't be easy to meet him. I need to talk to the police. Lord Jonah, can you allow me to make a call? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.